This program deals with devil worship and satanic beliefs. It contains explicit scenes and descriptions of violent crimes and rituals.
Americans are asking, who attacked our country?
You have declared a subliminal jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
And night fell on a different world.
And Iblis is thinking, I should be getting this position, not Adam, and this guy is created from dirt.
And how does the army feel about you being head of the Temple of Set?
And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but
I want you to give me power over Adam, and I want you to give me soldiers and minions and all of these things.
The people have so much to gain and have such an ulterior motive for putting me in a position I'm in. Will never let the true facts come above board to the world.
And I want you to be able to give me the ability to whisper into the hearts of mankind.
And who was the grotto leader? Don't remember his name. You don't remember the name of a person who involved you in murder?
Now these people are in very high positions, Jack. Yes.
Ooh, welcome back to Subliminal Jihad, episode 273. I'm your co-host, Dimitri.
I'm Khalid.
And today, we are revisiting a spooky season. The kind of, it is the spooky season. And
yes,
we wanted to put something together that, obviously dovetailed with the dark, the liminal, the demonic, the spooky, the goblin-esque.
The goblin-esque, yeah.
All kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I think we found something that I think is pretty appropriate. It's a crossroads, you could say.
This is actually something
things.
that we had on the docket since very early on, when this book came out in 2021.
Right. It was in the books you noticed, I think, tab that we kept.
Yeah, I think it might even predate books I noticed.
Wow.
Yeah, there are some other good books in there that we should consider, but I'm pretty sure it predates books I noticed. It was definitely a book I noticed, and I remember suggesting it early on, but I think it was too late that I discovered it. It might have been actually too late that I suggested we do it for this time, but because it was a lot to read, but we got it done.
Yeah. We rushed headlong through it, but I think we may be able to do it since we're focusing on one book today. One humble academic text.
Yes. Yeah. We might it might be interesting to branch out a little bit and talk about David Gordon White, because he's been on the show before. Well, he's not been on the show, but we've talked about him on the show. Mm-hmm. We read his Myth, the Dog Man, or sections of it, just kind of as tone setting for our Dog Man episode, or part of the mise en scène, or the bricolage of our Dog Man exploration. Yeah, but I guess we'll get a little bit deeper into this book, Daemons Are Forever, which is a pretty funny pun. I got to give him props for that one. That's a great academic book title. You always want a snappy title like that.
Of course.
That's a key. It's a great way to guarantee your book hits. But
I first went searching for it. I mistakenly thought it was called Demons Are Forever, and if you search for that book, you just get a bunch of YA sort of fantasy novels about maybe it's a teenage girl that hunts witches or something like that. There's a wacky book series of Demons Are Forever. Actually, there's several that are all in kind of the fantasy genre. But no, Daemons Are Forever. Now that
I guess he's not the first person to come up with that that one. But yeah.
Right. But this is a fascinating book, and in true, it's we really want to get into spooky season, sooner or later, you got to go back into the mists of time. And this book, I would say goes pretty far back into
it's
the
all
mistiest
about
myths we have.
It's all about going back to the mistiest myths. I mean, I think the best sort of delineation of what, because this was kind of a religious studies book. And, if you were going to put it in a particular discipline, I mean, I guess history of religions maybe is how he would describe it. But this is from the conclusion, this is probably the best expression of the thesis of the book. It says, I believe that the universality of demonological traditions, which is those I've treated here, this is the conclusion, ought to lead us to nuance the ways we imagine religion. Here, I cannot do better than to quote the Lord and Savior of the Christian world, who famously admonished his disciples to heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, and cast out demons. If these are the foundations of official Christianity, then demonology lies at the heart of this great religion. If such is the case with the world's other great religions, his quotes, and I would argue that it is, then religion has as much to do with immediate concerns as it does with its ultimate concern, with demonology as much as theology.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
He's basically going back as far as he can and tracing, I guess, the traditions as much as we can, discover them of like spiritual traditions interacting with spirits or, daemons, I guess, as the Greeks called them.
Yeah.
Which is a slightly more ambiguous term than the later kind of Christian demon,
Yeah,
where
right.
it was exclusive. We talked about this a little bit before, how, like demon is a very specific, a more relatively recent Christian phenomenon that is often just like solely associated with like the devil and evil. These are malevolent spirits. We talked a lot in, unpacking jinn theory, right? About how like jinn differ conceptually from demons in that, a jinn could totally act like a demon or be mistaken for a quote unquote demon, but, not all jinn, hashtag not all jinn, sometimes they're ambiguous, sometimes they're good jinn, and then if you start to like other episodes, like the one about, fairies in Ireland and, even, a little troll discourse we had in the last Max Martin episode. Fairies, sprites, as David Gordon White is very dedicated to, dogmen throughout, distant history, cryptids and spirits and all these things. Like, they've been around for a very long time. And I appreciate, like, he lays out he put these like academic cards on the table, I guess, like in the introduction, and he's like pushing back against a lot of tendencies I think that, have maybe sort of pushed demons to the side in terms of like the religious studies paradigms of, like modern Western universities, or until relatively recently, it wasn't seen as that important in the history of religion. Is that correct? I mean,
I guess I would say that like, because this like has to do with practice. This is like really getting into like the very like deep architecture of religious studies. I feel like he has like some more like immediate grievances, like, but if you like, really talk about like the construction of like, I think we talked about this a little bit before, like the concept of religion is an interesting one because it's a universal category basically, but it's emerges from and is fundamentally relative to a specific instance of the category, which is Christianity. Right? Like the idea of religion it was originally a term that was used within Christianity, and like it does have like precedence in kind of Roman religion before that, like, in religio, but it was a term basically meaning like ritual observances. And then like it was kind of extended to the sense, like a great example is like if you look at the way the Quran is translated in like early Latin translations. There's a famous verse from the Quran, lakum dinukum waliyadin, like to you your religion, to me mine. Well, that's how we would translate it now. But in the past, it was translated to you your law, to me my law, right? So this idea that like of like, religions as like something that is like universal and not like a specific aspect of Christianity dealing with ritual obligations, right? Like ritus and religio that are connected, but like, or like they're thought in sort of the same terms. Like, that was something that kind of started to happen during the early modern period, more or less. Again, as we were just talking about the Rosicrucian episode, with like, as Europeans were going to like the New World and like observing, or like what was to them the New World, and observing, indigenous practices, and they were sort of making analogies between their Christianity and those of the indigenous people, and they were imagining, like what, trying to define what their religion was. And this made sense in a way because religion was based on like ritual things about practices. And that was like, basically what they could see, like they could see them doing, they couldn't necessarily understand how they were articulating their like beliefs, but they could see like their practices. Right. And so that like kind of creates this dichotomy between like belief and practice that then becomes core to like the idea of religious studies. And like religion becomes more about like kind of like beliefs, or like now often we talk religions like faiths, right? They're mostly about like what you believe, or like they're fundamentally about what you believe rather than what you do. Like that's more important, because
a Protestant triumph, if there ever was one.
Yeah, exactly.
Through faith alone, ye shall be saved.
Right. And so I think that he connects like demonological practices with these kind of like vernacular traditions in a way. But he also like does take pains to say that, which I appreciate, because I think this is very much true, that like the line between like low or like little traditions and like the high traditions is like very, very blurry. And he gives some great examples of that, like of, the like churchmen and like these great, priests and stuff interacting with these demonological practices. So I think like that, maybe like what you're kind of like picking up on. But yeah, he kind of, I think that there's maybe a tendency to focus on like elites and elite discourses of religion. That definitely exists. And like to try to home in on what like the real is, like the official practice. And when you're leaving, like when you have in the history of Catholicism, that kind of that idea sort of makes some sense, because you do have like more later on. Actually, it's kind of exaggerated the extent to which was a centralized church early in the history of Catholicism.
Right.
But like,
that's a few hundred years.
More so than in other contexts, you do have like this kind of like magisterial doctrine where like there's ultimately the buck stops with one guy, and underneath him there's like a hierarchy, and like they have councils and they fight and everything, and there's schisms and there's like all sorts of different practices, and it is like a deeply diverse tradition. But you can at least like come up with an idea that like there is like an official doctrine. And like, whether you put stock in that or not, like you can actually like talk about this. Whereas when you try to apply that idea outside that context, then it becomes, I'm looking at this up on the screen now, I'm seeing how wildly I'm gesticulating. I'm going to try to stop, but like, because it's probably distracting, but like, but it's kind of like when you apply the idea of orthodoxy to Islam, for instance, right? You can maybe talk about like what's mainstream, what's like popular, but who is defining what is orthodoxy? Because there isn't like this idea of like right belief that is defined by like a magisterial doctrine, or even like an institution that is equivalent to a church in like an Islamic context. So that's a big problem.
Exactly.
To say nothing of like what David Gordon White's specialty is, which is India and like the Hindu tradition.
Right. I've even heard Catholics argue before that is kind of the unique strength of Catholicism, is that there is a guy at the top of it who gets to decide what is what, and all these other, whether it's Protestantism or Islam or anything else, or Hindu beliefs, like it's just a little too freestyle. Like anybody can kind of take it and run with it and blah blah blah, which is like I think there's a lot more nuance to it than that, and like having one guy in charge of it, as we'll probably talk about soon with Marcus, can get pretty bad in its own right. But yeah, you're right. Like to project that kind of structure as a kind of universal aspect of quote unquote religion, it's like a very deeply rooted tendency, I think, in like Western academia, that he's trying to like complexify a little bit. And also I think that he does address in the intro, like I guess you can probably explain it better than I can, but this kind of like obsession, which has taken dark turns, like in the 20th century, towards like finding the origin of something, like the original like wellspring. I think he likens it to kind of like obsession with etymology, like a sort of like over obsession with like where did it come from first, and then that can kind of like obviously. Famously, in the case of like the Nazis and their views on like the proto-Indo, European Aryan race that allegedly, came from the Indian subcontinent, right? Like you could weaponize that in some like, very troubling and, ahistorical ways. So he's trying to find like redeem maybe though the idea that there was kind of a common primordial culture like thousands of years ago, that I don't know, where a lot of these practices, there were like a lot of practices that would pop up in a few different regions like maybe during antiquity and even later, there's like some evidence that things like this were practiced. I don't know. Like how would you describe the argument about PIE in this? Like the Proto-Indo-European
it actually
culture.
like what you're talking about. It's kind of interesting because like this is like where it really gets interesting because what we've been talking about like so far, like this whole thing of like, oh, you know, like that's kind of like 19th century style of religious studies. Although you do see like he was a student of Mircea Eliade, who like famously like is like I was like it was funny. I was reading like the Wikipedia article of Mircea Eliade, like, you know, just kind of like refreshing myself on like his kind of politics. And, you know, he was like hugely influential in the like, you know, in religious studies. And like his like he was all about like kind of this he was almost sort of like a Joseph Campbell type of guy, like, you know, to give sort of a framework in terms of something we've recently talked about, where like he was really all about like this idea that like, you know, there was like this sort of basic experience of the sacred that like is common to all humanity, and these kind of like it's similar to like Levi Strauss in a way, like these sort of structures that like recur and are like you know completely transcultural and aren't like bound to any particular context or situation. Yeah, am I breaking up like audibly or like
no you're you're good. I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, and we talk about this kind of like religious experience as the root of everything, you know. But like, you know, as David Gordon White does point out, like, you know, I was struck by this quote, like reading his Wikipedia article that he had. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah. Eliade said in 1939. The Poles' resistance in Warsaw is a Jewish resistance. Only, you know, there's a slur that I feel I can use because I, you know, come from a Jewish ethnic background, but I won't use it. But it's a war with a Y. Are capable of the blackmail of putting women and children on the. It's very funny, like it's very ironic actually. He says, only the Y slur are capable of the blackmail of putting women and children on the front line to take advantage of the German sense of scruple, the most moral army in the world.
Oh my God!
The Germans have no
interest
in the destruction of Romania. Only a pro-German government can save us. What is happening on the frontier with Bukovina is a scandal because new waves of Jews are flooding into the country. Rather than a Romania again invaded by another slur, a K slur, it would be better to have a German protectorate.
Okay, I was wondering. White mentioned in the book, like, you know, before Eliade's like, you know, dark political past emerged, blah blah blah, and then he doesn't like say what that was. I guess that's it. I guess that's what his dark political past was. Yikes.
Yeah, it was pretty dark. Basically, that kind of definitely cast a shadow over like his work, but also like people started to find it like just tendentious and kind of I don't know, like wishy-washy in this way that you know, that kind of very like dated scholarship often is. But anyway, like to what you're talking about, like he kind of wants to like contra those guys. He sort of wants to like revive this idea that also has become unpopular. And this is where he kind of has an interesting critique. I'm not sure like if I'm fully on board. Like we can talk a little bit about like his sort of reception in scholarly literature, because like people have like taken him to task before for other things. I think like he's great at like coming up with like provocative things. Like I kind of want to do an episode on his book like Sinister Yogis too at one point. But anyway,
Sinister
like
Yogis.
Yeah.
We could maybe pair that with there's a book about like the Nazi interest in yoga that might be a good like, you know, pairing to do something.
Yeah, that could be interesting. But yeah, like anyways, like so he's kind of like critiquing, and this is sort of true. Like we talked about this a little bit, like at the beginning of our last episode, our last public episode. You know, for those who want to listen to the private episodes, you should subscribe to our Patreon because it is out there. But anyway, we were talking about the Rosicrucians, and I was talking about, you know, this sort of an historical like inflection point that comes with kind of, you know, this so-called like Renaissance or Enlightenment, like the Kantian categorical imperative and all of this stuff, and how that like is paralleled by like the innovation of like new, maybe not like technologies, but new sort of paradigms of domination and exploitation, basically like the genocide, right? And how it's hard to disentangle these things. And one of the great sort of postmodernists, you could say, like or post-colonial or decolonial critics of that, or people to like kind of call attention to that, was Walter Mignolo. But I was mentioning that like he wrote a blurb for this book. I think let me just look up like what it was. I think it was the India that is Bharat. Oh no, yeah, the India that is Bharat. India that is Bharat. By S. Jai Deepak, who's like a Hindu guy. So what David Gordon White points this out, like he says, that like there is like this kind of overlap that you start to see between this and he's very sensitive to this because he is like an Indologist or like a specialist on India. You do sort of see this overlap and like this instrumentalization of this kind of like decolonial idea. Let me see if I can find like the and like this sort of Hinduva ideology, right? Not to say that like
right.
I don't
he
find
gets in this in the intro, right?
Yeah.
He talks about how this, like, a lot of this is been kind of cleverly twisted by like Hinduva people to make it serve their own political ends, right? And then like the sort of like Soros like NGOs that were like pushing this radical I guess you'd say like like neolib, like kind of like woke kind of approach, have like basically said nothing as like Modi has like steamrolled his way into power, and like they're basically like not criticizing the sort of Hindutva abuse of this approach. Isn't this summed up in like the subaltern has spoken and he doesn't speak Sanskrit?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I highlighted that part because like I really like I agreed with that a lot, because I do feel like I remember when I was in graduate school, and like no shade to like that experience, which I actually enjoyed maybe more than most graduate students, I feel like. But there was this kind of thing that I was always like critical of, where it was kind of like, like it's kind of like this I almost associate it with Donna Haraway in a way. I was complaining about it before, where it's this kind of like weird binarization where it gets to like, okay, like, well, we need to get back in touch with the body and like the chthonic forces and like the curviness and like the Cthulhuoid shapes and like the geometric shapes are bad, and like
right, straight lines
straight lines are bad, and like the body is like where the like subaltern knowledge is, and like text is like oppressive and hegemonic, and it's like everyone like has texts, like it's like in some form, like text is like, if you start to say that like texts and books are like uniformly like hegemonic and like a force of like suppression, then you're gonna like you're gonna pigeonhole yourself into just, you're gonna cede territory to, it's exactly kind of what has happened. Like, let me read this passage like from the book where he goes in on Spivak. This might be more eloquent than I am going to be. In a highly influential essay, Can the Subaltern Speak? Gayatri Spivak took matters a step further, contending that because the historically muted subaltern subject was unable to speak for herself, any attempt to represent her subjectivity, however well-meaning, would actually contribute to her further repression. Furthermore, because a hyperreal Europe was always the basis for comparison, no non-Western or minority tradition could ever be evaluated on its own terms or according to its own values and aspirations. From this perspective, philological and textualist approaches to South Asian cultures, the legacy of dead white males, would stand especially guilty by association. As Stephanie Jameson delicately put it, the subaltern has spoken, and the general view is that he doesn't speak Sanskrit. So, like, you can see how he's kind of framing it in sort of like he's kind of like anti-woke. It is nuanced, but like, and I think like,
it is.
But he like, and I'm like, not like 100% like on board. I can tell like where his axe to grind is, but like, I think like his argument, like he does have a point, and like he does make it well. I'll just quote him. These polemics have had a corrosive effect on humanities and social sciences scholarship in the United States in particular. By ignoring or rejecting historical connections outright, we not only close ourselves off from constructive engagement with others, but also isolate ourselves from the outside world, and by the same token, contribute to the perceived irrelevance of the humanities and social sciences as legitimate academic disciplines. Not only do we impoverish ourselves, but we also leave the way open for religious ideologues, bigots, dilettantes, and journalists to define critical discourse and appropriate or invent selected mythic narratives as histories in order to further their own agendas. In India, where Hindu nationalists have been employing just such a strategy for the past decades, members of the subaltern school writing in the interest of social justice have largely remained silent, with only courageous objective historians like Romola Thapar raising their voices to challenge them. So, that is like a polemical thing and you could like take issue with it, but there is like I do think there is kind of a point there where like, yeah, it's true that like things like, like reading like texts and like, doing sort of close reading of like the sort of not even necessarily like the canonical or classical sources, but like, yeah, like textual, like philology has like fallen out of favor. And like, you can really do like critical philology. There's a lot of like valuable information there. And there's a lot that hasn't even been translated. And, like, but that's kind of like, I don't even know what, I guess they just want like this kind of like theory slop Haraway stuff, that's like not really fair, but it is weird. There is like this kind of strange kind of a bias against it. Now, on the other hand, like
he does say like he gives it some credit of like a lot of the impulses behind the kind of postmodern turn in the humanities in the US was kind of a thing that was like in a lot of respects long overdue, and like it challenged like a lot of assumptions that probably needed challenging, but then it kind of, he said like the other shoe never dropped, that it was then going to like rejuvenate scholarship and find a more like critical, like rigorous way that was like, self-aware and like distance itself from kind of these like colonialist sort of, colonialism laden frameworks that like previous people had been using. But it kind of just goes into a territory of like, I mean, we're still dealing, wasn't there just there was like there was a little discourse bubble, I feel like this week on social media around somebody being like LOL, like POCs like don't need to read Marx if they want to learn about like socialism, like socialist theory or whatever, because like they're oppressed, so like they already know that like everything about why capitalism is bad. Like, why would they ever read a dead old white guy? Like, that kind of thing. But that's the
thing.
Like,
I don't think that is necessarily wrong. But my thing is like, okay, well then, like, let's read like African intellectuals. Like let's like go and like study some of this like like pre-19th century or like pre-Marx like political or economic theory, like there is like a interest like Africana thought, but like it is weird, Blyden, like where there is this kind of effect where it's like there is like and there's some like exceptions. Some people do like go try to explore this, but like there like you can find examples of people do that, but like oftentimes it does like just kind of become like an excuse where it's like, okay, well, like then I'm not gonna like learn anything, or whatever. Like, I'm not going to. Yeah.
I will say, remember in like our sus physics episode, we talked about how there was this paradigm in like the sciences after Sputnik and up through like the early 70s where the U.S. government and kind of like the U.S. ruling class, all the institutions decided that they kind of panicked. I think it's safe to assume like maybe they genuinely felt a sense of like, oh, we're losing to like the Soviet Union, like scientifically, blah, blah, blah. We need to just like throw people into colleges and like educate our population and produce enough scientists to like keep up with all these technological advancements. But then like through the chaos of the 60s, they almost like, oops, like they spread education around too much, and then people started getting ideas. And then, you had like the turmoil of the 60s, blah, blah, blah. And you had a lot of pissed off people with college degrees that like didn't believe in, the system anymore. So like by the early 70s, also they were losing Vietnam. So they decided actually like this is not that great for us. You remember the Powell memo? Like, I don't know if we've ever talked about it in depth, but it is like a real thing. It was, I think maybe, was it a Supreme Court justice or somebody in 1971 that it was a confidential 1971 memorandum written by corporate lawyer Lewis F. Powell Jr., which urged American businesses to organize and fight back against what he called a broad attack on the free enterprise system. And I think there's like sections in this that are like, we need to like gatekeep education again. Like we need to, mainly by making it really expensive, and like we need to kind of pull back to and as a part of reasserting like a stronger corporate control over American society. Now I just think it's like interesting. I'm not saying that it's like, oh, like adoption of theory slop and this kind of stuff was like solely because of like a Powell memo plot, but in terms of broad trends of like where the powerful institutions like wanted things, what direction they wanted them to go in, you do start to see this import of like certain French theorists starting in the 70s, and then you start to get into like the kind of Judith Butler kind of territory like in the 80s, and then in the early 90s you have like the first kind of iteration of like quote unquote like political correctness kind of coming out of like basically leftist like academic milieus or whatever, and kind of like seeping its way in the culture. Then it kind of goes away for a while, but then it kind of comes back in like the 2010s, and there's a lot of like, I think this aspect of it of like, I don't need to interrogate like sources, like I'm just gonna kind of shoot from the hip. I don't know if that's
this is like again, I feel like I'm beating up on her, but this is just a paradigm. It's just an example. Like I'm flipping through Staying with the Trouble again now, and like the names I'm seeing are Goddard, Latour, her own boyfriend, stuff like that. Like I'm not seeing like African like
right.
scholars. They might be in here but I'm not seeing like the thought of like like Nubian scholars from the like 1st century BC or whatever. I'm not seeing like Muslim intellectuals and things like that from like the early modern period. I'm not seeing like Central Asian like alchemists or whatever. Like there's a whole world out there, and like
right.
Obviously like she's like her career like took what course it did, and like I understand, but like I'm just saying like that's not like but maybe so like okay, whatever. That's not the model, Like if you want to like if you actually are serious about this and serious about like this like decoloniality, then like let's actually get out of this. But anyway, so we're like let's actually like let's study languages, like let's study languages other than English and French, and like let's actually like read works in these languages. That's like important, like that's valuable. Like that's it, but and like something that you do see happening now, which I don't really think has anything to do with political correctness. It more has to do with like fascism, honestly, is like the destruction of like language education in colleges. It might be part of the backlash to that. Like, but
even that, I remember I was just reading recently, somebody had posted it on like X, and I'd had conversations with people about this, like about even elementary school education and the shift away from phonics-based reading education for children.
That's crazy.
Like, why does nobody talk about this? Like that, folks, they're making everybody like illiterate on purpose, like with this
that
whole
was really
language fad
to me.
thing.
Well, I don't know if they were doing it on purpose, but they did psyop themselves. Like again, whether it was on purpose or not, maybe it was, but like I just want to say it is very blackpilling, like how like they were able to get that over on people that like phonics was somehow like bad, and like I don't see what's like if I couldn't sound things out, like I would just be so lost in my life,
Yes.
Like I was shocked to hear that people had started to discourage sounding it out. Like sounding it out has been literally useful to me because I have like studied all these different languages, like I have been relying on sounding it out. Like literally, like to this day, I am still sounding it out. Like I don't even know if there is any other way to read. Like it's
I have no idea how I would learn like Spanish by like looking for context clues. That's apparently what they teach in a lot of school districts around the United States, is this whole language thing, which has been like scientifically like debunked by academics like over and over, but it just comes back like a zombie, and people just slip it in and like eliminate phonics education. And it's things like I
read this really depressing article about like one of the biggest evangelists for like anti-phonics like reading education, and she was like, we're all intellectuals or whatever, like we're all my like kids are like little intellectuals, but like they're like just really behind in reading, like, and they just like cannot read. Like
it's like dressed up, it's often dressed up in like super woke language too, which is like, that's one of the things that recurringly like pisses me off about like the right wing, like woke, like DEI, like blah blah blah, and then like the reaction to that being like there's a tiniest grain, but it's nothing like what like the right wing like perceives it as, in terms of like, oh, like when people argue that like there's literally no such thing as like DEI programs or like institutional like woke policies. I feel like I just from people I know in my life, like that was obviously a trend like in the last, like 10 years. Like it's definitely getting clawed back now, which shows how like I always thought it was probably like insincere on the part of all these mega corporations to like suddenly be like the most progressive allies of all time. But there's this idea of like something like whole language learning, which I was reading an article about how it was like brought to the Oakland school district, like not, but like it was kind of dressed up in this like, emancipatory language. Like phonics is somehow like, I don't know, patriarchal or like it's racist. Like they were kind of like implying that whole language learning because like everyone's a little genius. And like, if you just like do this and like I think one of these methods is described like sparking a love of reading is like the main goal, but like they don't teach you how to send out words. And it's just like, let the kids like do it on their own and like discover like the passion of reading. But it's like, how do you do that if you can't sound out words? It's like, it's kind of ass backwards, it seems, of like and it's kind of has this very like wonderful like love and light like progressive like vibe to it, which gets I think a lot of teachers just to like accept it without maybe like looking at it as critically as they should, and then it has like negative consequences. And which I almost feel like looking at things like the Powell memo, like I almost I feel like it's safer to assume that somewhere in the food chain of like the education paradigm, I don't like, how do people end up picking something like that ends up being so influential across the country that like just like seriously harms the literacy of like an entire generation of kids? Like that's insane, right? But like, so it must be tolerated for some reason. Like, like everyone's like getting paid to like not notice how shitty it is, or something in one way or another, like not, direct bribery, but like, I don't know. It's a strange phenomenon. So like, yeah, it's like sometimes you get something that's like, that's dressed up as like, oh, this is a new liberatory way of like looking at everything. But if it has like, they sneak in some like methodological like flaws in there that are not like helpful to the overall project of teaching people to read is empowering, like teaching people to actually learn how to read is empowering. And, like, so I don't know. It's just crazy. So I think there's room to critique, I think, without like being like a like blah 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 blah, like a right winger.
There definitely is. And like, I think like a good way to articulate it is that like, sometimes I feel like people want like something that doesn't exist, or like they have this kind of imaginary like perfect thinker like in their mind who's gonna like check all these boxes or whatever. And like because that person like someone who's like totally like unproblematic or like isn't like complicit in any kind of like negative like systems, or like, and is also like not only that but is also like readily available, or like that they know about like and requires no effort to learn about, and is just like there. And like because the to like engage with like the intellectual histories. Even like I was at a conference recently and like I heard like someone say like, oh, I said that I did intellectual history, and someone was like, oh, that to me like sounds just like boring, like I just think about like Kant when someone says that. And I'm like, there's like intellectual history like outside Europe and things like that, like that's like it like I was like,
it's a baby in the bathwater thing of like these like, dead old white men of a very specific part of the world like are trash. So therefore, like theory,
but it was weird because that person was a Shakespearean, and I was like, but Shakespeare's part of intellectual history, and they're like, no, it's not. And I was like, yeah, it is. But like anyway, like I don't know, just as like negative thing. I was like, well, what should I say instead? Like cultural history? And they're like, but I mean, like, no, like I think that person's a good scholar. I think they were just voicing, like kind of a weird, like ambient sort of prejudice. But like, and I like never even considered that like people like reacted badly to intellectual history like as an idea. But like, I think that because people don't have like this kind of thing that's like very easily accessible, doesn't require you to like learn, Mandarin, or like, to learn another language or something, or, to to learn Pali or like anything like that, you know, to learn Arabic, to learn Persian, to learn Urdu, like and or you know, you can just learn your Romance languages or maybe German and you know, if that and like like that's the thing, like because that person isn't there, like they just end up like recycling over and over like the same like French pedophiles, like child abusers. Like it's like kind of, you know, like it's yeah, but
they love it. Yeah, the CIA approved. Yeah, and not
yeah.
CIA,
but yeah, like
funded,
and I'm not
CIA
like that's the thing. I'm not
approved
saying
French
that like those
pedophile
people,
theorists.
as I was saying recently, I'm not saying that those people don't have like anything of value like in their work, especially just by virtue of their influence. But at the same time, like they're not unproblematic. They're like exactly, you know, part of the tradition that we're supposed to be critiquing. Anyway, whatever.
Right.
We're kind of getting away. But my point is that like relative to the book, by way of this, like what his like main thing is that he's trying to get back to something that has kind of been, you know, scuttled or like sort of become unfashionable, which is like the idea of like a Proto-Indo-European, what he calls monogenesis, you know, and he tries to distinguish this from like diffusionism, which is like he considers as being like kind of overly focused on like the origins of everything. So what he's kind of proposing is like something that like takes as its basis the idea that there is some kind of like Proto-Indo-European culture from which like all the practices he's going to be discussing emerge, but we don't have to like be like going back because it is ultimately speculative. Like he doesn't actually have evidence of this. It is just like it's just like his basically his hypothesis to explain gaps that he can't explain, right? And we can take a look at some of those and like see like if how we might deal with it. But yeah, so yeah,
like,
but
there's some linguistic evidence that would suggest like the Proto-Indo-European kind of like the primordial common tongue or whatever that started to split like maybe 4,000 years ago or something.
I mean,
and then,
PIE is a thing. Like people have made like much more out of it than it is.
Because there
like,
are cognate words in like Balto-Slavic, in Germanic, in Celtic, in right like that, and all these groups.
I think so. Like you know, and I think like I don't know. I really don't know enough. I'm not like a linguist, so I really don't know enough to like really say what the basis of like these categorizations is. I think like it is possible that like there is like, you know, like I'm not sure. I can't like truly evaluate like what the basis of like the language family thing and like what languages are categorized where. I certainly do feel like on a, you know, just like an experiential level, like having like, you know, like Arabic does have that triliteral root thing that Hebrew also has, you know, and even like I guess Egyptian, like, you know, Coptic and ancient Egyptian, like they aren't Semitic languages, but they do also kind of have this triliteral root thing, and they're like similar in certain ways with like the sort of attached pronouns and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, like I can see some of the boundaries are like blurry sometimes. I mean, but yeah, I also definitely can see like how Persian and Latin like are really similar. You know, so again, like I think that maybe the boundaries are a little bit more porous than people make them out to be. But yeah, I really can't say like what I know. People have like critiqued this, but I mean, what he says is that like, you know, the shared vocabulary of the Indo-European languages points to a common origin, the reconstructed Proto-Indo-European language. The fact of monogenesis does not preclude a constellation of multidirectional contacts and exchanges, which is the topic of this book, across time and space. In other words, it is possible to engage with a monogenesis hypothesis while keeping one's focus on transformations rather than origins. That's basically his whole thing.
Right. That's a good summary of like his approach to this is, like the idea that there would be an original race that then, I don't know, is somehow like not in contact with other different groups and is just sort of like existing in like a void, and then that's where everyone came from, and then we all broke off. Like, you know, the almost impossible thing to like even prove, and kind of like a wild goose chase a little bit, you know. But whereas the focusing on transformation, I think is very interesting because people like, I think as he lays out like old trade networks and things like that were like quite active, you know, thousands and thousands of years ago, and people were always like encountering one another, and there was always like a little bit of like bleed over and exchange going on,
Yeah.
so to like focus too much on like the primordial original, whatever,
Especially when we don't actually have any proof of it. It's just
right, right.
okay, so like these, like basically what he does throughout this book is say like these two practices or these two traditions are extremely similar. Like how are they like why are they so similar when like one is in India and one is in Ireland or something? He's saying that okay, well this ultimately goes back to like an Indo-European proto myth or like proto culture, yeah, like that's kind of is having it both ways. Like I kind of agree with what Ryan Carroll says in the chat. I don't get the fixation on monistic sources for things. It's weird because he's like kind of saying like, yeah, well there is this proto culture, but like I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on like, how like what happened later on, and that's like going to make it okay. So like I guess, in a way like that means that the idea itself, I mean, I guess everything does have to like culturally originate from somewhere. Like I don't know, but whatever. Like again, I guess it's fair enough. I mean, trying
then
to
it's
like
you want to go
drain of like who came up with it. Yeah, it is kind of this.
Then we can keep going. Like, how did those people
yeah.
get from Africa to like the subcontinent,
and
then
it does kind of become
European,
this thing of like which people are the best, which people made this up, where does this really come from, who really invented this or whatever, which is like really like the problem with that stuff. But
it's fascinating how little we know. Like when we go that far back, like we literally, it is still covered in mist, and like
totally
you could barely guess like what, look for these little tiny clues here and there. But I guess he decides to focus on a specific category, in terms of like looking at maybe commonalities between like these older cultures, which is like its treatment of daemons. Right.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically saying that like daemons are, he doesn't use this term, but they're kind of like the substrate of like this like Indo-European proto myth, and all these different ways of interacting with daemons, all these different types of daemons, like are kind of spinning out from the experiences of like an earlier culture, and that's like explains their kind of things. We could think of a particular chapter for. I should note that like kind of his like slightly like he puts him in a slight distance, but like he continually refers to kind of as like a lodestar on this like the Indo-Europeanist Dumézil, Georges Dumézil, who was like a French like Indo-Europeanist philologist, who was also like kind of like a fascist basically. But like he does kind of draw like a lot on his work, especially in the later chapter, so that's like something that should be borne in mind. Like there's this interesting kind of streak to this, but I think it's interesting to go, like he definitely brings up some interesting suggestions. I like I mean, where do you feel like, I feel like it might be like the first like the second chapter, because the introduction is chapter 1. The second chapter kind of is focused on South Asia. I mean, South Asia is present throughout, but it might be interesting to go to
jump to the
chapter 3. There's a good thing about the
3.
evil eye in chapter 3.
The chapter,
right?
Chapter 3 gets into some good evil eye stuff. How the evil eye, the idea of the evil eye, like goes back so far and pops up in like a bunch of multiple different cultures and context, and is still such a thing to this day. You see it around LA sometimes.
Totally.
I was in Greece a few years ago. Every house has like the blue evil eye thing on it, and it's and which is this is I guess what you call like an apotropaic device, right? Which is something that wards off.
That's a better word
spirits.
than what I usually use, which is prophylactic. But I feel like that term has gained a certain connotation.
Right. Well, the devil got his little grubby paws on it. No, apotropaic. We got to bring it back. It's a great word. No,
that's people use that. That's a good one. It even sounds fancier, really, if you think about it.
It does.
It sounds more erudite. The Greek root, but
it doesn't sound so like religious.
I guess prophylactic is also Greek, but whatever. I think,
I guess, it sounds like it. I don't know if you want to read anything about there's stuff about like the Eidolon, I guess.
Well, that's interesting. I was thinking. So he's talking about like this book, which is an amazing title. Like there's some great, like there's some great like translated titles, in this book. Let me get to it. Hold He's talking about this book. I don't know if I can actually like it's the Mahama Yuri Vidya Rajni Sutra, which means the teaching of the great peahen, the queen of spells. And that's like the earliest like compendium of like demonological lore in Buddhism.
Okay.
And like the earliest like version of this that we have is from like the early 4th century CE. But like he like traces it back to like the 1st centuries CE.
Mm-hmm.
The Christian era, which he calls the common era, but it's a pet peeve of mine. That's like one hill I will die on. But
what, you think it should be called the Christian era?
yeah, because like it's not common.
You're right. Like
I guess it
the
is
only thing
increasingly
that
common,
happened,
but it's kind of annoying that it is like literally based on Jesus Christ's birth. So
that's another one that tries to be more woke, but it's actually masking that we're still basing everything off like the birth
that kind of
Jesus.
is a good example. Yeah,
right. Because I
I
remember being a kid in Catholic school. They emphasized like in middle school that like CE is what we use. We don't use before Christ, Anno Domini anymore. We use CE and BCE. That's serious. But actually they were like teaching us to like do an insight roll and like keep using the Catholic calendar. Just by through with secular language. Interesting. Yeah. So a lot of
So
okay, go for it.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say that like this is a good part that kind of gets into the evil eye thing, which is a discussion of the shadow, and that leads into the Eidolon thing. So by way of demonstrating the universal effectiveness of the Great Peacock spell, the MMVS. That's the book I just mentioned. The great teaching of the Peahen, the Queen of Spells, provides extensive catalogs of the supernatural beings against which it affords protection. Several of these, which rank them according to their relative benevolence or malevolence, comprise the following collective names, always given in the same order: Devas, Nagas, Asuras, Marutas, Garudas, Kinaras, Maharagas, Yakshas, Rakashas. Rakshasas. Pretas, Pisakas, Bhutas, Kumbhashas, Putanas, Kalaputanas, Skandas, Unmadas, Chayas. That's going to be important. Apasmaras and Ostaras. Again, like I hope I didn't pronounce any of those wrong because I do not speak Sanskrit, but or read it, but.
Yeah, a lot of the characters are missing in my PDF, so I can't even.
Yeah. That's true. Some of the characters are missing here for me too. But So as for the Chayas first introduced here, these reappear time and again in both Sanskrit and vernacular forms from the medieval period down to the present day. And by medieval, like in a South Asian context, I guess he means pre-Mughal. So just to clarify, because anyway, the second recurring list, because like it's kind of like what? But a second recurring list found in the MMVS's demonological catalogs is less systemic and more idiosyncratic. Noteworthy is the fact that the word shaya is the sole term to appear twice in the second set of lists. The first time as a class of demons, the second time as ellipsis something else. The longest of these passages reads as follows: slain are the Katyas, slain the Emaciators, slain the Chachordas, slain the Kirasas, the missing character, the Sikas, the Presakas, slain are the Skandas, the Unmadas, the Chayas, the Aspamaras, the Astarakas, slain are fears, deadly filters and poison, slain is consumption, things poorly digested, things vomited, and the evil Chayas, slain those that beheld with evil intent, those whose names are written with evil intent, those that are trodden upon with evil intent, slain are those that have been shaken off. It's interesting, like you can. It's very similar to kind of these apotropaic sort of suras of the Quran in a lot of ways, but you mostly see like kind of Greco-Roman stuff, like European stuff, and like Sanskritic stuff in this, because or dharmic stuff in this. You don't really get into. This is one of my big complaints about the book, but anyway, as you might imagine. But in any case, so given the fact that few of these names or terms are found in either classical or Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit, my translation here is tentative. In any case, I am offering it to underscore the redundant use of the term chaya, the first time in the company of the same demonic beings is found in the first set of lists mentioned above, and the second time in the midst of a heterogeneous catalog of pathologies, toxins, and acts of sorcery, and to introduce three other terms, one Vedic and two not found in earlier Sanskrit sources: Kirtya, Chakorda, and Vetada. The final section of this chapter will be devoted to a discussion of these terms within the Sanskrit literary record, as well as in the broader context of contacts and exchanges between the KGB region, India, Iran, and the Mediterranean world. There you go. So yeah, then he talks about like this word khayal, which is actually like kind of also reminded me of the Arabic khayal in a lot of ways.
What does that mean?
It basically is very similar, like in its sort of semantic range to khaya. It can mean shadow, shade, imagination, like, or specter or spirit. Like, you know, this whole like thing about like as we get like later into the text, like we talk about it more, but like the khayal al-dhil, the sort of shade of the shadow, or the taif al-khayal. That is like this the taif al-khayal in particular. That's like a sort of specter of like that you see like kind of in a desolate place when you're traveling. It's like a big topos in like Arabic poetry, like especially, you know, like it comes about early on. There's a good article called "The Earliest Demon Lover." It's an old article, but I think it's still it still holds up pretty well. I forget the author of it, but it's called "The Earliest Demon Lover." And yeah, basically, like, because that's usually what it is. It's like the sort of figure of the beloved that like the lonely traveler sees as he's like sort of wandering through the desert, and he's passing by these ruined habitations and things like that. And you know, it's interesting because like, you know, it's kind of like the owl, the bird, you know, the screeching bird that also comes up here, like the strix in Roman sort of myths and things like that. But yeah. So, but anyway, you can kind of get this idea here. Khaya is a feminine Sanskrit noun attested since the time of the Vedas. In classical Sanskrit, its primary sense is shadow, shade, or reflected image. That's also there in khayal. It can also denote luster, light, and complexion. And like this, you know, you can almost see too in the Arabic haya, which is kind of like aspect like that. Again, maybe I'm being too etymological, but he kind of encourages it. He really gets into the sort of like etymology stuff. More so, this is another way it's kind of like a unique. It's kind of that's also kind of out of vogue as to go into the philology type thing. But while the MMS's default use of the term retains the feminine ending, in one passage we find both masculine and feminine forms employed to denote a wide range of kinship and court relationships. Male chayas, female chayas, chaya sons, chaya daughters, chaya chamberlains, chaya ladies in waiting. Again, I don't really know how to pronounce this word, so I'm using this kind of sound, but that might not be right. Chaya retainers and female chaya retainers. However, in the passages translated, the expression "the evil chaya" or dus chaya, like dis, like kind of a discord, I guess, same Indo-European root, is a feminine singular noun embedded in a series of terms denoting acts of sorcery rather than names of demons. The second use of the term, which would appear to be intentional on the part of the MMVS's compilers, will be the focus of the next section of the chapter. And then he like starts talking about like, you know, the chayas as demons. This is kind of what I was talking about. Like in the Pali, chaya can, in addition to shadow or shade, also mean phantom. That's very, very similar. Like in several Indo-Aryan languages, chaya parusa has the sense of a dead person appearing as his shadow. That is like really like a thing in like you know, sort of, I think there might even be some examples in like presumably pre-Islamic Arabic poetry, certainly post-Islamic and like very early on in the like the Arabic poetic tradition. But you know, so yeah, like in the Marwari,
the ghostly apparition of a dead person.
Yeah, like sometimes a dead, but sometimes someone who's even alive, but definitely like kind of like a spirit.
Astral projection, I guess.
Kind of. Yeah. But it's not necessarily like the person. You know, it kind of varies. It's basically like, you know, the same kind of you know, spectrum that you see like even today, like in our understanding of like the paranormal or whatever, where there's like astral bodies, ghosts, you know, and then like, you know, things that aren't human but appear human, you know. In the Mawari and Mawari languages of Rajasthan, the expression khaya ana denotes the onslaught of a state of possession, often induced, in which a spirit medium's body is racked by contortions and his or her power of speech taken over by the possessing spirit being. In modern Hindi, both khaya and its alo form saya denote a spirit being. Bhut, pret, jinn, and pari, you know, pari, you might know, is like kind of, yeah, like sort of synonym for jinn. Sometimes people call it fairies, but jinn are fairies, basically. With the expressions of saya hona, meaning possessed by a spirit being. I wonder, is pari where fairy comes from? Anyway, whatever. You know,
yeah.
Jamie, look that up.
Kind of a fairy.
We need a Jamie to look these things up for us.
It's a Philistine Palestine.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, but with the yes, M's and
reverse.
B's and P's and F's, you see that a lot. But
Yeah.
so anyway, goes on. And talking about like all the different sort of meanings of this. So too in modern Persian, Sayad denotes shade, shadow, and apparition. Blah blah blah. Talking about these different demons. He goes on.
Well,
He goes on for a while actually.
Yeah, there's a
But,
part about
yeah.
the 1825, circa 1825 CE, the Netra Tantra, and I think the Tantra of the Eye, whose 19th chapter, devoted to demonology, opens with an account of the workings of the evil eye, here called the casting of the gaze. So yeah, there's a little info here about the Netra Tantra in like this chapter. It says the NT was composed in the Vale of Kashmir, some 150 miles due south of the Gilgit Valley, that pivot of Silk Road trade, where 5th century codices containing early Mahayana demonological works were uncovered in the last century. This is a composite work with 2 well-defined layers of redaction. The first of these is the demonological stratum, which comprises unadorned descriptions of demons, symptoms of demonological possession, and techniques for countering the same. This stratum comprises a pragmatic, technical guide to certain types of ritual as practiced by sadakas, tantric white magicians working for the protection of the king and society at large. It's like Jedi vibes. Prominently featured are votive rites, including practices of protection, pacification, exorcism, and the cultivation of prosperity, the, quote, 6 acts of tantric sorcery. The second layer of redaction, which attempts to structure the text into a coherent and unified thesis, is devoted to the form of Shiva, known as the Lord of Immortality, and more importantly, to his all-powerful death-conquering mantra, which controls, routs, and destroys demons with total efficacy. In this way, it resembles the MMVS's great Peacock spell. I guess there's a rough ships
Which
and
we just
content.
read, yeah.
I guess one word for these demons also was, or at least it's translated as Caesars, like those who seize, particularly children. That's like a common motif, it seems like.
Yeah, it is interesting. I do want to get to that. We definitely should talk about that chapter because it's a good one. But this is good. He quotes this from the NT, this book you were just talking about.
Yeah.
This is the sole comprehensive treatment of the evil eye and the entire tantric corpus. He says to his knowledge. The discussion opens with the great goddess requesting clarification from Shiva concerning something he had revealed to her previously. Now I wish to hear this. There is a doubt in my heart concerning the evil eye that the mothers always cast upon people. Those, he has in brackets, mother goddesses are innumerable, their power immeasurable. But the yoginis who afflict their victims by means of the chaya opening are more powerful still. They are horribly filthy. They are violent, merciless, fearless, mighty, and injurious to all creatures, especially children.
No.
Their number is incalculable. This being the case, tell me the strategy, and then he has in brackets, for combating them. They constantly engage in trickery, chalam, that takes the form of chaya, and likewise a trickery that consists of casting of the gaze. Oh God, the chaya, how manifold is it thought to be? What is the peril of the evil eye? How does one divert it?
No. Wow.
I guess I should have said it as, oh God, like that, because it's kind of like addressing a God, like, oh God.
He's really asking, oh God. Oh God, Shiva.
Yeah, literally.
Like, how do I protect against it?
Yes, the explanation is great. Like, replying that he will provide a comprehensive account of the Chaya, Shiva launches into a demonological foundation myth in which we see him creating innumerable hosts of demonic beings for the destruction of the Daityas, the perennial archenemies of the gods. Once the Daityas have been destroyed, however, these demonic beings, here called mothers, spirit beings, Bhutas, and Caesars, request from Shiva the boon of invincibility, which he grants. Now invincible, these begin to oppress the gods themselves, who in turn appeal to Shiva to destroy them. To this end, Shiva creates tens of millions of mantras, or male spell beings, and vidyas, female spell beings, or vidyas. And the terrified mothers and Caesars who have not been destroyed by these animated spells are cast by Shiva into various desolate regions of the sky, earth, and the waters, the correlates of the lonely mountains, forests, and ravines that are the haunts of the Chayas of Uttarakhand.
Right. Don't,
forget.
isn't it like a
but
Reddit thing to call video games Vidya?
Vidya, it's a 4chan thing as I
It's a
know it,
4chan
but
thing.
it might have
Yeah.
spread to Reddit.
Bunch
Yeah,
of female spell beings. Interesting.
yeah. I guess these are the Vidyas, but still
Yeah,
same
yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Still. Yeah, this is the trickery in the form of the Chaya.
Yeah.
They're sus.
They're very sus. But yeah, he I guess then compares that to yeah, I just keep reading great parts. The techniques for releasing children of their persons who have fallen prey to the conjoined gaze of their superhuman and human tormentors. I mean, this is the thing like in Islam as well. Like there's this like real big like polemic that like may have been like a practice like in Sufism of Nazar Bazi, like the sort of gaze play in particular. Like I'm using the Persian term, but it did like make its way into it was very like it was across like the Islamic world, this idea of like gazing at like beardless boys, like and kind of like in contemplating their beauty, you sort of like it becomes like kind of a divine, that's the idea, it becomes kind of like a divine experience, like that there was this sort of practice of gazing at beardless boys. But you can see how this gets folded into the idea of the evil eye. I mean, I was just reading recently like this because I was just reading recently like this kind of debate that happened in like an early like late Ottoman magazine. I might have mentioned on the show. It was about like basically the permissibility of like European style theater. It was interesting like because a lot of like the Sunni traditionals, it's very interesting because like it really illuminates like the history of Salafism and what Salafism was very different from like the kind of stereotype that we have of Salafism now, because it really was like sort of this more like heterogeneous like reform movement where you had like like the Salafis were like defending like having European style theater basically, and it was like the traditional Sunnis who were like no, like that's like basically what they were doing was like marshaling all these old arguments against various practices, but like including the Sufi practice of gazing at beardless boys.
I see.
Which
they thought theater qualified as.
Exactly, like it was very similar because you did have like youths. It was like used for pedagogy. You act in school plays and things like that.
Yeah,
that was like where people were doing it. So like you would have these beardless youths kind of like playing different parts, like wearing makeup, like you could see how it's like and when they would be citing like Al-Ghazali and stuff like that, and these sort of teachings about the evil eye. But he does also bring up the Latin fatum as the root for fairy, so I should have remembered that. Griffin clarified that pari is not related etymologically to fairy, but
he gets into talking a little more about the child abduction of these spirits in some of these texts and like earlier ones. It says, they plague children with all manner of affliction. They take the form of she-wolves, female hyenas, and birds of evil omen. In the verses that follow in the NT myth, Shiva describes the ways in which the mothers, spirit beings, and Caesars, his own creations, are able to torment their victims. Here, a palette of sinful and impure acts or dispositions opens the wicked souled human evildoer to possession and corruption by these demonic entities. And it is in his description of their modus operandi that Shiva fully explains the term Chaya Hidram. This is quote from Shiva. A vile woman, or likewise a man, having not bathed, may cast a shadow on children and kings, their queens and ascetics. By means of that very Chaya opening, those spirit beings, as well as the mothers who are more powerful still, that have found their opening, effect the casting of their evil gaze. It is out of a wish to destroy them that the injurious ones, i.e. the spirit beings and the mothers, cast their wild gaze on children, whilst those supremely sinful evildoers, i.e. humans possessed of or by the Chaya, are likewise tormented or consumed by the spirit beings, the capital F fevers, etc. If when conjointly casting their fearsome gaze, these human evildoers, spirit beings and mothers, and many others, should then look collectively at children as well as at the aforementioned king, queen, or ascetic, then, knowing that the evil eye is manifested, one should act for their welfare. Wow, very, dangerous. So, as with the NT, the Kashyapa Samhita's account of the workings of the evil eye also involves evil or impure human intermediaries whose gaze becomes a conduit for child abductresses to penetrate the bodies of their victims. Here, a child abductress is said to latch onto the openings or doors of unrighteousness opened in evil persons through their sinful acts. When such an evil person fixes his or her gaze on a pregnant woman for whom protective rites have not been performed, the child abductress latches onto her. Interesting. Yeah, a lot of talk about opening people's weak points and, yeah.
Let me describe okay, this is I don't mean to jump ahead, but you can go back a little bit, but
sure.
The sole Sanskrit languages of Khalam, he says, aside from the NT, in the technical sense, is a verse from the circa 8th century TSBH. I forget which book that is, but anyway, and this is quoted in the commentary on NT. Just uses abbreviation, but so here we read that. Is a female being who, for the purpose of shape-shifting, continually drinks the fluids of living beings after attracting them through trickery, chalena, and who, after obtaining their fluids, slaughters the victims, shall be known as Shakini, ever delighting in dreadful places. In the vernacular context, the term Khal denotes, as we have seen, a type of demon in Uttarakhand with its cognate Shah. Again, there's a C with a dot on top of it. I have no idea how to pronounce that, but
meaning goblin.
Yeah, exactly. Which does beg the question of what meaning does goblin have specifically? Because I really I don't know. It's not a. To me, it's not a term with a fixed meaning. I feel it's pretty
corresponding
big,
roughly to goblin, maybe, but it means goblin.
Yeah,
who came up with goblin?
Specifically, it means goblin. Yeah, exactly. It's not
to say that
it's not it means dog or something. Yeah, it's
save that for goblins
exactly
too.
What is a goblin? Yeah. Save that for goblins too. We got to look up how to pronounce that word and what exactly it is. But
right.
But and he brings this up before, he says that. It is possible that these ideas have cognates in other cultures. When I read that, I think that is a skinwalker. That is
or the changeling, myths about the changeling, about how an evil spirit.
A little bit different.
Well, I guess the baby is a switch out, but
that's
still idea
switching.
Is it okay?
A female being, I guess a skinwalker can be a guy too, but who for the purpose of shapeshifting drinks, it's an evil, a witch basically, an evil,
a vampiric witch.
Vampiric witch. That's that's kind of a lot like a skinwalker, and it he says okay, well then that must have been the Indo-European culture that crossed
the Bering Strait.
Yeah, or that. Well, obviously that was not brought over by European colonization. That
this is the Wendigo.
So it must have been the Bering Strait.
Another word for skinwalker, or are they just related concepts? And
I think they're kind of related concepts. I think the Wendigo is someone who becomes addicted to eating human flesh,
right.
And kind of wastes away.
Disease.
Yeah, something yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of different ideas around it, but so I don't know, that is one again, I'm not actually endorsing this idea, but it is kind of interesting, because it's just kind of a funny thing that, or a curious little thing that, basically at a certain point he's okay, well all these practices are so diffuse, right? And we can even say okay, well I can think of a bunch of different examples where they exist in other contexts. So here's the very appropriate for spooky season.
Right.
His thing is okay, well this was all made up by a Proto-Indo-European culture that we don't know anything about but must have existed. And it's well, another possibly more parsimonious explanation might be that there simply are demons. Witches.
It is interesting to read the book, which I did kind of have in the back of my mind of what if we just decide to be generous and assume that all of these people are dealing with a phenomenon and they're just different cultures are looking for what works and what doesn't. Then I guess maybe people figured out what kind of protective ritual things they could do somehow seem to be effective or whatever. If you allow yourself to believe that, then I mean he doesn't explicitly say that this is all fake. that there obviously is no
He
such
does
thing as
kind of
demons.
imply that it is fake.
I guess he does in a way. Like,
Yeah.
he doesn't focus much on, I don't know. Yeah, he just sort of mentions what they think they're doing, and
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
there's
which
not really
is,
evidence to like prove
yes,
either
yes.
way.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
no, you're right. You're right. Like,
But I mean, in that
he kind of
case, like,
dodges it.
yeah,
He
yeah. And I
dodges the
mean,
question
that's
about
fair enough.
why
Like,
did everybody
this is
think
like
this
a
is a
book like
phenomenon?
published by some academic press. Like, you are not gonna get away with it saying like, well, like one possible explanation might be that demons are real. It's just like, or might be that like these beings exist in some way. Like, I mean, I feel like there might be like that's almost like a strength I think of like the decolonial like approach is like the ability to like consider that possibility,
That's
and like to
true.
think
Yeah.
about like different like epistemic regimes, like
Right.
and
Right.
different ways of like conceptualizing things. Like, I think that is like, I mean, it is very interesting that that is like, but even when we get to like the child abduction chapter where he talks about these practices around like changelings and stuff like
Yeah.
you know like
Yeah.
it is very interesting like how widely diffuse those practices are, and I know that like his scope is limited, like
He's not talking about every single example, but I mean, because I guess his argument would be that he's comparing
and
a
it strengthens his
discrete number
argument
of
to
cultures
be
that are connected,
yeah.
but not. This isn't like like global culture of humans that he's talking about, because obviously there's people in other parts of the world that are not like directly descended from the
exactly,
Indo-European hypothetical
yeah. And the more,
proto-civilization,
like,
but they still do have myths like this, like mythologies like this and practices like this about spirits.
This actually has been like a criticism of David Gordon White like before, like his whole thing, as you see even in this book, is that like tantra is real mainstream like Hindu, like Hinduism, I guess, whatever, again, like insofar as that is like a thing you can objectify. Like he says that it was a tantra, not like the bhakti tradition, that was really mainstream, and people have criticized that as like an argument that's like tendentious and like that he like ignores evidence that contradicts it, or like they say like, okay, well, yeah, it's true that bhakti wasn't mainstream, but that doesn't mean tantra was, because it's kind of this whole thing of like this idea of orthodoxy that is being transposed from a context that doesn't make any sense, and like this whole thing of like trying to find the mainstream kind of is like a pointless rabbit hole. And like when his book Sinister Yogis, people criticized him for like ignoring all the evidence of yogis like not being sinister, and like like
Oh, it
yeah,
really
like,
is. It's not a like, it doesn't have a not all yogis like qualifier. It's just like yogis are sus.
I don't, but yeah, he's kind of saying that like yogis in general, it was not like really about like meditation based stuff. It was about like being sus and like using powers and like like kind of like what you see like just described here. Like it wasn't
white
really like
magic,
you think
like protective white magic, things like that.
well,
and maybe not so
not
white
only that,
magic.
but just like kind of your stereotypical yoga, like meditation based. Like maybe that is an important corrective, but there is like people would say there is a huge tradition of meditation based yoga,
Yeah.
that is not about like being like a little like sus goblin who like goes around using like cities on people,
He does mention a little further in this chapter kind of an interesting, I don't know, synchronicity that the aforementioned Caesars or Grahas, those who seize, not Julius Caesar, though funny that we pronounce it that way, or whatever. But it's the same term that's used for the planets in in South Asia, basically, and he says that. He's argued previously, it's likely that the astronomical grouping called the Navagraha, the 9 Caesars, comprised by the sun, moon, 5 visible planets, and 2 eclipse nodes, was a transposition of a group of 9 Caesars already known to earlier epic mythology from the realm of demonology to that of astrology. Furthermore, the planets are described in Indian astrological literature as personified powers with human characteristics, emotions, and powers, including, as the circa 600 to 800 CE Bharat Parasara Horasastra, Parasara's great teaching on horoscopy indicates, quote, evil gaze. It has an evil. They have evil gazes, basically, these planets.
Yeah.
So,
Right,
as
yeah.
Katerina Gwenzi notes,
Kind of like when Mars is in retrograde, I guess. Like they
Then
have
the-
like, evil influence they can, yeah.
this totally
Yeah.
lines up to like basically even the way a lot of people still think about astrology today.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
for sure.
The
Yeah.
valence of the planet.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
So according to this, like malevolent planets afflict humans with their rage, their wrath, and their gaze. A planet's influence is said to attach itself to Lagna, and the planets to seize Pakarna, their prey. These two Hindi verbs also being widely employed to describe the assaults of the spirits of the dead. Boot pret.
This is the part where like the your anointed community, your like coast to coast listeners, your
Secret Sun watchers,
yeah,
those
like,
types of.
yeah.
No, we got
Yeah.
a folks line coming up here. What?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you know it? The darkest and most malign of the planetary Caesars is Sani, or Saturn, whose dread influence is magnified by the great duration of his revolution around the sun, a full 30 years. His gaze is thought to both imprint his characteristics on those he views and brand them with his own undesirable physical features. The introduction to a 2001 Hindi language astrological guide encapsulates Saturn's perils. Quote, "The power of Sani's cruel gaze is well known to everyone. The afflicted person is bound by a chain of curses. When Sani becomes fully enraged, no one is able to put a halt to his total devastation." The ancient Greeks held a similar view, linked to the optics of extramission. This is a good, interesting part about intramission and extramission.
Thing. Yeah. Intramission versus extramission. Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
and the optics, the evolution of optics. So linked to
Yeah.
the optics of extramission, for them, quote, "the heavenly bodies that shoot inflamed rays from their eyes see the world at the same time as they illuminate it, because their luminous rays are also rays of vision that strike and touch the objects that they illuminate." In the centuries prior to the beginning of the Common Era, the introduction of Babylonian and Greek astral sciences profoundly transformed Indic astronomy and astrology. By the beginning of the Common Era, India had adopted the Greek system in naming its days of the week after the planetary deities Sun, Moon, Mars, Jupiter, Mercury, Venus, and Saturn, and many other features of Indian astrology, including the system of the decans and the names of the zodiacal signs, were also borrowed more or less directly from the Greco-Roman systems. Pivotal works in the history of India's hybridized system of horoscopic astrology are the Ionian astrological calculation of nativity and the ancient Ionian astrological calculation of nativity, titles that bespeak the prestige of the Ionians, I guess the Greeks, in the field. In the light of this, a statement concerning Saturn's wrath, embedded in a 4th century CE Greek novel, the Aethopica of Heliodorus of Emesa, bears comparison with the wrath of the South Asian Sani. Quote, "A few years later, the fatal course of the celestial bodies upset my destiny. The eye of Saturn struck my house and changed its fortunes for the worse." No. So, and then it talks about how there was a shift from, where does it say here? About the extramission theory.
It is crazy, though, just to let me know, it is crazy that Saturn actually does have, like, an eye,
Yes,
like,
okay.
Obviously they had no way of knowing that, but
They have no way of knowing it, and it's probably the sussest thing in the solar system. Like, to be perfectly honest, like it is. Once you see the satellite photos that were taken in the 70s, like this fucking storm, this massive storm that is like the size of multiple Earths, that has probably been going on for all of known human civilization, like at least I think 20,000 years. This storm has been happening, and if you look at it, it is a perfect hexagon that is kind of like, it's a storm for some reason, like the gravitational rotation of Saturn causes this kind of perfect geometry of a hexagonal storm that then when you plug into like all of the myths from antiquity,
it literally looks
about
like an eye, like it has like a little,
it has an eye like a hurricane.
Storm. Like, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Saturn hexagon storm. Yeah, I gotta let me see if I can. I want to bring up a picture for the
wow,
folks.
I guess they can't explain why it is a hexagon. Multiple hypotheses have been developed, but like we don't know actually why.
Folks, I mean, yeah. Let's see here. extremely sus. Yeah, I know. I guess I can bring it up. But you can look it up. Look up, Hexagon Storm Saturn. It's just there, like perfectly with a little dot. Like it actually, if you added some kind of little, lines across it, it looks exactly like the OpenAI logo, doesn't it? Right?
Wait, what logo are you like? Wait, a logo? Which logo are you talking about?
The OpenAI logo.
Oh, the OpenAI logo. I think it's the opening eye logo. Okay, yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, it's a little bit tilted, but it is a hexagon. I'm looking at it right now. It's a little bit like they softened the edges technically, so it's kind of these bendy things. But like roughly speaking,
it's like a bunch of like links in a chain, kind of.
And it does have a hexagon in the middle of it. Actually, there's a hexagon hiding right in the middle. Yeah, actually, the more I look at the OpenAI logo. Secret meaning behind the OpenAI logo. Wow, there's like a website. CommunityOpenAI.com has a whole like discourse around it. They think it looks like an aperture of a
Someone in the chat
camera.
says it's a geoengineered storm.
folks, it's a consciousness. It's a storm consciousness.
DW4s.
It does reach out and look at us. It's a
geoengineered storm, folks. Yeah.
You're in a soul prison, exactly.
Yeah.
Talk about a prison
on Saturn.
Talk about a prison planet, and also like the fact that it has these perfect rings that also like can't. They probably aren't that old. Like like the rings should technically disperse over millions of years. I don't know what it is. The problem, maybe a moon getting hit or something like that. But it's like just perfectly. At least the eye of Jupiter is sus, but like it's a little bit organic looking, like. It's like this blob, that's like that's been spinning for thousands of years. But like the Saturn's just a little too clean. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's a little too perfect, And it's like, and I guess it is the last planet that ancient people could have seen with the naked eye, right?
Yeah,
the furthest out one.
Yeah, the furthest out one. Yes. And
as Elon would say.
Yeah.
Here's the part about extramission versus intramission. He says, since the time of the ancients, the West has entertained two opposing modes of visual perception. The extramission theory, first promulgated by Empedocles in the 5th century BCE, was treated systematically in Plato's Timaeus, then followed by Galen, Ptolemy, St. Augustine, Al-Kindi, William of Conches, and many others. The counter theory of intromission, first formulated by Democritus, was refined by Aristotle, then significantly elaborated by Avicenna, Ibn Sina, and Ibn al-Haytham. Mm-hmm. The intromission theory, which laid the foundation for modern optics, maintained that visual perception is initiated on the surface of the retina in response to light received from the environment. Contrary-wise, the extramission model of perception posited that vision occurs when a ray of light emitted by the eye conforms to the surface of an object of perception. As such, the locus of perception was not the eye, but rather the surface of an object external to the body. This model also implied that the act of perception created a sort of hard connection between the viewing eye and the viewed object, with vision a form of touching. The extramission model, which also grounded Indic optical theory from the beginning of the Common Era down to the modern period, is encapsulated in an aphorism from Gautama's 1st to 2nd century CE Nyaya Sutra, the Manual of Logic. Quote, perception is the consequence of contact between a ray and an object. Here, the ray's source was none other than the luminous mind or soul, whose effulgence streamed outward through the eyes. An important corollary to this theory, developed in later commentarial literature, was the concept of an enhanced type of ocular perception by which powerful beings could penetrate and possess the bodies and minds of other weaker beings through their rays of perception. This power, shared by gods, enlightened Buddhas, powerful demons, and yogis, was variously termed yogi perception, the divine eye, the Buddha eye, and in the case of a yogi's possession or takeover of other bodies, subtle yoga. Whoa, okay. While the intromission model has generally held the field of Western optics since the 11th century, the extramission model has remained operative in other realms of discourse down to the present day. Prominent among these has been the articulation of the workings of the evil eye, which links the strong emotions of love and envy to an internal power emitted through the eyes onto and into a human victim. As Thomas Rakoczy has shown, hundreds of ancient Greek works by over 150 authors contain thousands of references to the evil eye, Baskanos ophthalmos, and the dread power of the envious gaze, both human and divine, and by extension, planetary. The ancient Greek Baskanos, or sorcerer, one who bewitches, has for its Latin cognate fascinus. That's interesting. It's a little close to fascism, which
fascinate.
But a fasci was really like a bundle of sticks, right?
Fascase. Yeah.
The fasci part, which means evil spell bewitchment.
I assume like that. It has to do, maybe, I'm guessing, I don't really know like if they're connected etymologically, but I think like those sticks are bound together,
right? And then like broken.
Yeah, fascinus. Yeah, it's like binding too. Yeah,
like in that movie that came out this year. What was it called? Weapons.
Oh yeah,
snapping the twig.
Yeah, well, I was thinking more like that they're tied together in a bundle, and like if you're fascinated by someone, they like they're holding a bind on you.
They have a bind on you.
Yeah,
really got a hold on me. Okay, so with let's see, with both terms, the Greco-Roman ones related to the casting of the evil eye, as well as to the amulets, often phallic, worn around the neck to ward off the same. I've already mentioned one of the Hellenistic works that treat the evil eye, Heliodorus's Ethiopica. As Matthew Dickey has argued, however, this work's account of the evil eye is intentionally sensationalized, a device for Heliodorus to lampoon the mystagogy of fraudulent Egyptian priests and holy men in general. Interesting. So this is one of the attributed things from the 3rd century, I guess, to Alexander of Aphrodisias. And he said, "Why do certain persons cast an evil eye, and especially against children? Because their children's nature is sensitive and variable. What transpires is as follows. There are certain persons who, due to the wickedness of their souls, have a nature that is bitten by what is beautiful. When their wickedness is awakened by limitless envy, this wickedness, shoots forth from the pupils of the eyes like a poisonous destructive beam. When it penetrates the envied person through the eyes, it changes soul and nature into an insalubrious mixture, decomposes the bodily fluids, and leads the bodies of these persons to illness." Damn. So they're sickos out there, and they stare at you, and like if they have enough hate in their soul, and they're corrupted enough by limitless envy, then I guess they can kind of like cast an astral spell on you somehow and like hurt you, and cast these rays of light through their eyes, and fucking get you. And so, they're dealing back then even with people that are deciding to use spiritual practices in like malicious ways, These are people that sound like they're doing this consciously. Whether or not they're like sorcerers or witches, sometimes maybe they're just like regular people that are full of hate and then decide to, curse somebody, It seems like a constant, across all these cultures, this is like a serious concern.
Definitely it's a serious concern. Yeah. It's funny because at the end of the book, he says something that is like, which, the critique is like actually a good one where he's like, kind of critiquing writers who look at historical materials or look at, whatever sources, and they use those sources as like data, kind of like grist for the mill of whatever like the theoretical vogue is or whatever, or basically like our concerns. They like take these things, they take this information and shape it to whatever like, argument or whatever concern they want to make, which you see ubiquitously across all academic writing in every field of the humanities anyway, and really of the sciences too, even though like, the one thing that's cringe about him is like how he kind of like puts aside like the the objective sciences, but not really true. And he like ends with some like sus like quantum allegory, but anyway, my point was that he talks about how like we shouldn't do that, because actually what is interesting about it is how like different they are from us, and how like we could never understand like the mentality of like a woman who like leaves her child like in the forest, like believing that is a changeling. And I'm like, well, people like that exist still. Like people like still do that, and like we could easily be like sliding back like into that.
Especially since nobody can read anymore, and they're just like watching AI slop, which is like almost literally demonic. Certainly daemonic, I would say. Yeah, we could be
Yeah.
sliding back towards that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
It
you got to kill the devil before the world ended, you know.
well,
As
yeah,
Big
exactly.
Lurch
When you have
said,
drugs,
well, yeah,
that's a whole other
drugs, you know.
factor in this. Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean,
um,
even the description when he goes down here of like idola, and is that related to the word like pareidola?
yeah.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think.
Okay. Like a
Yeah,
pareidola, which is kind of a
yeah,
visual
like
perception, right?
yeah,
Like a
exactly. Yeah,
like a false
like a
pattern.
false image. Yeah. Or like a side image or something. Like
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
Right. So it
Yeah.
also has this like it kind of slippery kind of definition of being kind of like a phantom or like a false image. He even says, I think that like a simulacrum or an effulgence or a shade is, you know, one way to
Oh,
like in
speaking of
Plutarch,
etymology, I looked it up myself. Doesn't seem to be a known connection between Fosques and Fascinum.
Okay.
They like the etymology, like he says, is not known for Fascinum, but it
Hmm.
does seem like that its connection with like it. There's like a phallus called a Fascinum, which is like is a prophylactic or apotropaic amulet. You know, like a kind of like a like a as Griffin 15 says in the chat, the witch phallus. But it seems like that is like it acquired that meaning from the like kind of like how they call Nazar amulets like Nazar, it's like transferred like from the meaning of spell, so they call
Okay.
this protection thing the Foskinum. So I guess the meaning of stick maybe isn't connected there, but anyway,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
just wanted to
Anyways.
clarify. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's more
Yeah, he
stuff
talks
on
about
Daemons, yeah.
Democritus, I think is pretty good,
Yeah, he
he
has a
talks
nice
about like
chart that compares Hellenistic, Tantric, and
yeah, he's
Iranian
got a lot of charts in
traditions.
this book.
Tantric and Hellenistic have a lot of like similarities, basically.
Yeah.
More than, but Iran does have, Persian culture has some as well.
Yeah, I mean, I
Zoroastrian
wonder, like,
culture.
he does kind of like say, like, okay, these are more similar than any other, um, you know, like, uh, like tradition in the world. I don't really know if that's necessarily true, um, because like we don't even have like like in order to prove this, you would have to show like the others, and then like say like, well, these elements don't exist in those. Because I'm thinking like, there definitely were like ideas of like extremissive vision that did circulate in like the Islamic world. In fact, like one of the big like things that like kind of like cultural supremacists so it said about like Muslims was that like or the Islamic intellectual cultures were that like the theories of optics that people like Ibn al-Haytham like produced, like those weren't like being adopted like widely. They weren't popular, and it was really the Westerners who saw like the value in those theories of optics. Like there was some guy, I think Ibn Sal, who came up with like Kepler's optical theories like before Kepler did, but like no one cared. So like therefore Kepler gets the credit and like he was better
Wow.
or whatever. But it was because like other theories of vision were like paramount, like the like ideas about extramission, like the idea of like praetor perception, to use like my coinage, like
Mhm.
the like vision through the heart, like seeing with like non-empirical senses, like when you can see like behold the prophet in the eye of your heart, like vision in dreams, things like that, like so
Right,
there are
right.
like all different other paradigms of vision, and like there's a whole discourse of al-ain, in like the Arab context and others.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's not even saying like, is there like I would be interested to like learn more about like if there are like evil eye beliefs in like Amerindian or like indigenous American contexts,
That
because
would be interesting.
yeah, I would imagine that there might be, because like some of this is like sort of influenced by um Griffin 15 is making me laugh here. But like I wonder, like I feel like some of this is sort of influenced by like, okay, yeah, like Saturn is like, it takes all this long time to rotate, like therefore like there's something, I don't know, there's something like sus about it to people. So like therefore they like associate
Right.
it with evil. So like I wonder if like, and the idea of like evil like coming upon, it does seem to be like a visceral thing that like people like feel. I
People's
don't know.
belief in
Again, I guess I'm getting
evil
into
forces
mortality stuff, but like, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, they do.
Yeah.
You could just be they were superstitious and they didn't understand that nature nature just does that. Like it just kills you and there's scary things, and so they as early thinking primates. They tried to reason with the little information they had, and so they figured there must be an invisible world, but it actually was just the shamans making all of it up. And I think there's probably a little bit of that going on. I mean, people came up with like sort of the various concepts to kind of like pin down some of this stuff to varying degrees of like officialness, right? Like these texts from the 800s that we're reading, like kind of try to like pin down like what are the practical techniques you need to protect against an evil sicko that is possessed by like a bad spirit, a Caesar, or like prevent your child from being kidnapped by a spirit, which is the same thing as Saturn, which is sus. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Probably go to the child abduction chapter. Let me
we probably
read this part about Democritus. Let me read this part about Democritus, the few words on his theory of visual impressions.
Sure.
Democritus was, in fact, the earliest theory of intromission, albeit an incoherent one. Such was the considered opinion of Theophrastus, in whose writings we find the most complete documentation of Democritus's optics. Furthermore, Democritus may never have used the vocabulary of the Eidola in his primary explanation of vision. This being the case, Plutarch's evocation of Democritus for the extramission-based optics of the evil eye he and his dinner guests have been discussing appears to have been misplaced. However, Plutarch's parting words to his invitees leave open to the possibility that Democritus's Eidola were altogether irrelevant to his discussion of the evil eye. I wonder how it escaped you that the only things I denied to the emanations were life and free will. Don't think that I want to make your flesh creep and throw you into a panic late at night like this by bringing on sentient Eidola and apparitions, phasmata. As Colin Webster has observed, a number of ancient writers, some of them citing Democritus, linked these Eidola to paranormal experience rather than or in addition to the mechanics of visual perception. In Homer, the Eidola were phantoms, objective dream images that carried with them the effects of the waking mental activities of the dreamers themselves. Noting that such images would necessarily have been perceived as daemons by those who were affected by them, Jean Salem cites another passage from Plutarch where the author explicitly equates daimonas with Eidola. Here, in the discussion of the role of daemons as oracles, he muses that Democritus, by his prayer that we may meet with propitious spirits, clearly recognized that there exists another class of these beings that is perverse and possessed of vicious predilections and impulses. As such, these evil Eidola would have been the Greek cognates of the MMVS's Deus Chaias, or, the bad Chaias.
Yeah.
So it is very interesting. Yeah, like Plutarch may well have understood the Eidola predicted in the casting of the evil eye to have been not only images, shades, reflections, or simulacra, but also demonic beings, bringing his account of the workings of the evil eye still closer to those of the later Pahlavi sources and the NT. Not, I keep thinking New Testament because that's usually what it stands for, but no, not abbreviation. Stands for, the something Tantra. So
it is funny reading about all these like descriptions of like daemons that are like illusions that like pretend to be real people and stuff, and now thinking about the era of
exactly
AI avatars and stuff that we kind of created. Even though they love to talk about how they're gonna create a god, what they've definitely created is like a demon machine,
Daemons,
like a literal, like daemon, like not real
everywhere.
daemons. Controlled by algorithms that are also, this chapter does talk a lot about the role of like one's gazing into one's like reflection in like a bowl of oil or some kind of reflective, like seeing glass or something like that, as part of an exorcism ritual to like get rid of a demon, like, to get rid of somebody's a demonic possession or something like that pops up in like a few different cultures, like the gazing into one's reflection. I don't know. It also has certain AI kind of
that's a good one too. Like the miroir. Like that is that's a pretty good part. Like what is the fingernails, right?
Looking into the reflection of a fingernail.
That is a good part. He talks about the sort of divinatory practice. I mean, this is kind of like a good part to discuss. He talks about this situation where this is an ethnography of the exorcism of a Chaya demon in Uttarakhand. A small fire was lit, and over it was placed an old round tin filled with oil. the girl was directed to stand over the hot oil and look into it. At that moment, she was supposed to see the chaya superimposed on her own face. She was directed to kick over the tin of oil with her foot. When she did so, it spilled into the fire and a huge tongue of flame shot up. If the ritual was done properly, and if she followed these instructions, the chaya would be left behind and would not afflict her anymore. Then he says and it's in the early, this is a practice that I guess he wants to trace back further. And he says in its earliest iterations, the practice was divinatory. Divination by gazing into a reflective surface, often oil, is known as lecanomancy. Closely related is catoptromancy, divination by gazing into a mirror. Several other types of reflective surfaces are also used: an oil-smeared fingernail, the blade of a sword, and so forth. In many cases, a lighted lamp or torch is a divination support. Hereafter, I will refer to the general practice as mirror divination. All these practices are attested in South Asian sources. etc. And also in these demonic papyri. One of the most interesting, is this one. It is worthy of note that no datable European account of the full-blown practice of mirror divination appears prior to a circa 1159 CE work, the Polycraticus of John of Salisbury, who identifies its practitioners as specularies, those who, practicing divination on such polished and shining objects as weapon blades, basins, chalices, and various sorts of mirrors, answer curious people's questions. What makes John's account most fascinating is that it is autobiographical. The child in the sacrilegious ritual he describes is none other than himself, and the diviner a member of the Catholic clergy. In it, he and an older child have been made to sit at the priest's feet and are called upon to reveal to him the demons they perceive the surface of his fingernail or the polished surface of a basin that had been rubbed with holy oil or chrism.
Charisma, is that have a
I think
common
Christ
root with
Koopa
charisma?
might have brought that up. I don't think it actually
chrism.
is, but
you're right, because they're two separately different. They're two slightly different things.
But
interesting.
Yeah. Whereas his older companion claimed to see the pale reflection of this or that demon, John, through the grace of God, saw nothing. In Jewish traditions dating from Talmudic times, the polished surfaces employed in lecanomancy and catoptromancy were referred to as the princes of oil, princes of the thumbnail, and so forth. An account of the practice recovered from the Cairo Geniza brings together the diviner, a lad or a virgin girl, a mirror, and a demon named Apulis. Wow, I've never heard of that. Damn.
Very, very
I never heard of that
Crowley-esque.
document from the Cairo Geniza.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, sus oil.
A lad or a virgin girl has to do this. Okay, interesting.
That's ideal.
Yeah, this is a whole interesting thing where you need a young child to
even the earlier thing I read was who's the ideal victim? Like a pure child who has total innocence, and oh my god. Yeah, somebody said in the chat this is an ancient QAnon ep,
it really
child
is,
abduction, the storm on Saturn. It is kind of there is a lot of, this is kind of ancient Pizzagate, they're out, frazzle drip, they're out here.
Let me read this to you. This is this is from, what is this from? It's our okay, so blah blah blah. This is, I guess, in a bunch of different texts. The practice of using child clairvoyance and mirror divination in a handful of tantric Hindu, tantric Buddhist, and Taoist texts from Kashmir, Northeast India, China, Japan, and Tibet. The earliest of these are the Hindu Nishva Saguha, Secret Manual of Shiva's Yogic Outbreath. Again, this is in brackets, secret, brackets, manual of, brackets, Shiva's Yogic Outbreath. So secret of outbreath is really, I guess, what it means. I think this guy's a little bit too liberal with the brackets, if you ask me.
He's bracketing a lot. Yeah,
he's bracketing a lot. There's a big brackets in this one, but I'm going to read the brackets because I think people might appreciate it. In order to bring about the descent of prajna, he shall, with mind composed, meditate on mercurial Bhairava. Let him then practice mental absorption on that, in brackets, God. Then this is a bracketed part. Then, after placing a variety of tantric divinities on the corners of a hexagonal diagram and on his own body, and after repeating the garland and root mantras, he should place a filled pot, which, he has brackets water, over the center, I guess, of the diagram, is in brackets, and a platter whose surface is scattered with grains of rice. On top of that, an oil lamp, a wick, and encant, I guess he says, the lamp with mantras. Having brought together a girl and a handsome boy, I don't know why he should be handsome. I don't know if it's not a translation thing, but he should assemble 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, male or female children, according to however many are available, and he should venerate them with offerings of fragrant flowers, incense, oil lamps, and edibles. He should deposit the mantra divinities, beginning with the divinity of the heart, on each of those girls. Then, having stared into that lamp, all of the girls will behold Daemons in its flame, and the boys will behold both good and evil. The girls will declare either success or failure. Knowing this to be the descent of Prashna, the alchemist may now undertake all the alchemical procedures. Sus.
Yeah, a little bit sus. Yeah.
Like what? It's very interesting. This practice of like, you need to have a young boy or girl look into the mirror. When you ask them to see, the child will immediately tell you all that you want to know. You should then summon a dragon spirit. Once you have its name in mind, send the young boy or girl in a purified place and recite the spell over him or her. The spirit will then enter the child's heart, and when the officiant discusses matters pertaining to the past, present, or future, all questions will be answered. This really is like an ancient QAnon episode.
Yeah,
it's like adrenochrome. Like, children are the perfect
like
vessel.
a reptoid ChatGPT oracle.
All right.
Yeah, a little sus. We should move on to chapter 4, medieval and modern child abductions. But I just want to take a quick break for 1 minute, and then we can jump right into that.
All right. What's up?
We're back in it now for this chapter, medieval and modern child abductions.
Yeah, this has an amazing epigraph. Like it starts off with like it's just like it just begins with like rockabye baby on the treetop when the wind blows the cradle will rock, 18th century English lullaby.
No.
It's like the only chapter with an epigraph. And it's just that those lines. Very sinister. Yeah, like with the title and then like it's like, all right, what's going on here?
Yeah, it opens with a strange anecdote about St. Lawrence.
Yeah, because St. Lawrence was like a changeling actually, which you wouldn't necessarily know. I certainly didn't know.
Right. I guess his 3rd century martyrdom was depicted on the frescoes of dozens of medieval Danish country churches, but I guess there's 2 that portray his infancy. Let's see. So the earlier one depicts a particular episode from his early infancy in 3 successive tableaus. In the first, we see his mother lying asleep on her bed with a tiny outline of a baby's head on the pillow next to her. The second, and most interesting for our purposes, shows a horned faun, or daemon, handing the tightly swaddled baby up to another imp in a laurel tree. The gangly legs and tail of the latter are twined around the trunk of the tree so as to closely mimic its branches. The final scene shows the face and torso of a humanoid figure in the same tree, remitting the infant, its head now encircled by a halo, into the hands of a person in ecclesiastical dress. Here as well, the body of this figure appears to blend into the ramifications of the tree itself. So, yeah, he does get changelinged, I guess, but then becomes a base Christian martyr.
He gets rescued, basically. Like, so basically what happened was, like, in the earliest extant version of his birth legend, he was born to a pagan king and queen of Spain who had vowed to convert to Christianity if God would grant them a son. Shortly after the child's birth, but prior to his baptism, the devil transformed himself into the likeness of the newborn babe, taking the real Lawrence to a forest in Rome, abandoned him there in a basket hanging from a bay laurel tree. There he was discovered by Pope Sixtus II, who, hearing the child crying in his basket, took him down, baptized him, and named him Lawrence after the tree in which he had been suspended.
That's a wild story to attribute to like an actual pope that they they just found.
They just
this,
found a baby.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
Pope
yeah, like
Sixtus.
I mean, this guy like lived in the like 3rd century, so I
Yeah,
feel like that was definitely a time when like people generally didn't know that much. Like, your average like Christian didn't know too much about like what the Pope was doing or like anything, But
right. They could
I
just
mean,
kind
who
of say
knows?
stuff.
Allahu alam, I guess. But
Right,
yeah,
right.
some of these stories. Um, yeah, and I guess there's a similar one about Saint Stephen too, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, this is yeah, it's interesting because like you sometimes think like, oh, like when you're thinking about the Protestant Reformation, like I mean they were a little bit nuts, but like you kind of think like maybe like that there's generally like this kind of I mean it was like as we talked about last time, like it really was like post Reformation that you had like the kind of witch like
Trials.
craze, as they say,
Yeah.
like the real like mass witch burnings all
Hmm.
across Europe. But so yeah, I guess maybe you could point to the Catholic Church as being more inclined to kind of crack down on the superstitions or something, but or maybe neither. Maybe they both
But I
were.
feel
But
like they.
yeah,
I mean, there was the Inquisition, which also persecuted in a slightly different way. Like,
yeah, it
but
was less
still,
focused on like superstition and more on like you know, I guess like it was in some cases. In some cases, it wasn't really superstition. It was more like heretical practices, like within
right,
Christianity, and also like crypto Judaism and crypto Islam.
right. Secretly
But yeah, this is
doing.
the quote of Martin Luther I was thinking of, where Luther says like he would just drown all changelings rather than trying to, um, get like
Damn,
switch
bro.
them back. Yeah.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah, he would drown the little devils. That's what he said. Yeah, yeah. He said they were a soulless mass of flesh. Damn. Um. Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
So
It
yes.
was it. The he said White says that Luther's diatribe was but a late chapter in the demonization of the daemons of pagan Europe, a phenomenon as old as Christendom itself. The leading architect of this strategy was St. Augustine, who, in drawing up an inventory of superstitions that it was the Church's task to repudiate and eradicate, officialized the entrance of the fairies of pagan traditions into the Christian lexicon and imagination. It was also Augustine who first described how such creatures reproduced, explaining in his City of God that sylvans and fauns were demonic incubi that copulated with human women. That these were the same sorts of forest-dwelling creatures as those pictured on our 15th century Danish church ceilings is attested a century after Augustine by Martianus Capella, who explained that, quote, where the earth is inaccessible to men, it is crowded with the ancient beings who inhabit the woods and forests, groves, lakes, springs, and rivers. The beings called pans, fauns, phones, satyrs, sylvani, nymphs, fatui, and fatue, or fantui, or even fanae, or fani. Fanes are named after, or fanes are named after these, whose custom it is to prophecy. All of these beings die, just like men, after an extended lifespan, but they have extraordinary powers of foreknowledge, aggression, and injury. Yeah. He notes that nearly all terms in F here derive from fatas, the Latin term for the fates, three ancient goddesses who meted out and cut off the lives of mortals. From their name is derived the Old French fée and the modern French fée, fairy, from which fairy, the source of the medieval and modern English fairy. Okay. So
Yeah.
it comes from fate, I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
But however, the words changeling and fairy have long been used interchangeably in Great Britain, and folk traditions across Western European, identify changelings as the offspring of shape-changing fairies, fauns, elves, dwarves, trolls, evil spirits, underworld folk, water sprites, and the like. No less a figure than Merlin, King Arthur's wizardly mentor, was said to have been a changeling. No.
Mhm.
The passing of that enchanted world is lamented in the opening verses of The
And
Wife
yeah,
of
that makes sense. I
Bathsale
guess
by
that's where he
Chaucer.
got some of his powers from, right? From being like in fairyland when he was a baby, maybe. You know?
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it would make sense why he was built a
Yeah.
little different.
Yeah, he was built different. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Chaucer sarcastically links the demons of Augustinian doctrine to the churchmen of his day.
It's funny that
King Arthur.
Griffin 15 mentioned venerating dog saints because Saint Goynefort actually comes up in this chapter.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe read this book, but yeah.
They oh yeah, Saint Guinefort, yeah, in the Dome region of southeastern France. Not the only dogman saint, right? Is it like
Yeah,
Saint
there's also
Christopher?
Saint Christopher, yeah, who had he was a dog-headed saint,
Right.
but Saint Goynefort is just a dog.
Oh.
He's like kind of like you probably heard this story. Actually, it goes back to the Pachatantra, which is like Kalila Wadimna, like the sort of animal fables. Like it's basically the story of like the dog. It's actually in Lady and the Tramp, the Disney movie Lady and the Tramp. You see the same kind of story, even though I guess Lady is vindicated. It's like a baby's lying in a cradle and the snake like comes in to like kill the baby, and the dog like jumps on the snake to like get it, like like kill, gets rid of the snake, but like the baby is like, I guess either killed or like, I think the baby is killed or either injured or something. And then the master comes home and he sees the dog with like these bloody fangs and the baby is dead. And he's like, no, like, and kills the dog. But the dog was an innocent martyr, like an innocent Christian
he was actually
martyr.
Defending the baby.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
The AI,
like
the AI video where with the glass bridge.
Exactly. It was that golden retriever.
The
golden retriever was unjustly killed. And
that's
so,
horrible. Yeah. I guess it's classified in the Arne Thompson Uther folktale type index under the heading "The Innocent Dog." It's appeared in some. It's a version of a folktale recorded in some 40 languages. So this is like a very common trope. And I guess
yeah.
Wow.
I guess in the original like Pachatantra, it's like a mongoose instead of a dog because I guess people I don't know have pet mongooses, or maybe it was just a wandering mongoose that like happened to see this, snake about to have its way with the child, but.
Right.
But
I
yeah,
assume
so
not a saint today, right? Like the
Saint
Catholics.
Goynefort?
Yeah, the Catholics didn't approve of this, right?
I don't know. I feel like maybe like there are like some folk practices about Saint Goynefort still going on, but I don't know.
Probably not officially canonized. He just mentions that this was abusively viewed as a saint in the eyes of the Catholic Church.
Yeah. I don't know what that
like
what he
they're
means by
abusing
abusively.
the like title, that they're not following the canonization process, namely that it has to be like a human.
I don't know if he would be like invoking he does that a lot, using the adverb abusively in a way that like I don't really quite understand, but yeah, so but like Saint Goynefort's like worship like actually did involve these like sort of traditions around like how to get your kid back from fairies, demons, that take them. So this is what Jean-Claude Schmitt, and he brilliantly analyzed this in a groundbreaking work of historical anthropology, whose findings I follow here. The salient portions of Stevens' report are as follows. Above all, though, it was women with sick or weak children who took them to this place. They would go and seek out an old woman in a fortified town a league distant, and she taught them the rituals they should enact in order to make offerings to demons, and in order to invoke them, and she led them to the place. When they arrived, they would make offerings of salt and other things. They would hang their babies in swaddling clothes, paniculos, on the bushes roundabout. They would drive nails into the trees which had grown in this place. They would pass the naked babies between the trunks of 2 trees. The mother on one side held the baby and threw it 9 times to the old trees. The woman, who was on the other side, invoking the demons, they called upon the fauns in the forest of Rimite to take the sick, feeble child, which they said was theirs, and to return their child that the fauns had taken away, fat and well, safe and sound. As Stephen relates, a mother would then expose her infant, leaving it naked and alone on straw from the cradle at the foot of Goynefort's tree for the time it took for 1-inch candles placed around the baby's head or in the trunk of the tree above to burn down. Wow, this is a pretty dangerous practice. All right. Following which
they would lightly sort of even like whip babies with like little tree branches and
expose. She also plunged it 9 times in the waters of the nearby Calderon River.
Ooh.
If after this it survived, it was only by virtue of a strong constitution. The Dominican monk concludes his report by saying that he exhumed the body of the uncanonized saint, who was in fact a greyhound, and cut in the trees around his shrine, burying them together with the dog's bones.
Wow.
So yeah, I guess that makes sense for why the Dominican monk Stephen did that, because how the greyhound came to be abusively viewed, at least in the eyes of the church, as a saint in this medieval, it is in the eyes of the church, so not, abusive in general. But in this medieval backwater is a story in itself. Yeah, then he tells this whole story that we just told. But yeah, then he talks about like how local were they and if they belonged to a wider network of practice, like talking about these sort of rites around the Greyhound Shrine. How local were those rites? The leaving the baby out, etc., dunking in the water, trying to get the demons to come back and give you your real baby. And did that, did they belong to a wider network of practice? Did that network extend beyond the borders of the Dombes region, of France, of medieval Europe? The ritual, as Stephen presents it, was divided into 3 parts or sequences performed at 2 different sites. The first comprised a set of preliminaries, offerings of salt and other substances, a nail driven into the saint's tree, and swaddling clothes hung on surrounding bushes. It was the presence of Goynefort's remains there that made these practices effective, with his saintly charisma transmitted through the vegetation growing above his tomb, imparting its healing powers to the sickly infant. Those powers are referenced in the oft-repeated formula attested in a half-dozen languages: Saint Goynefort, for life or for death. The logic of the rite's second sequence was entirely different. The saint had no role here. This was a ritual transaction, an exchange between 2 mothers involving exposure, an integral component of changeling rites across all of Europe. The naked child, laid out on the straw of its cradle, was abandoned to the elements, fire and wild beasts, including, as Stephen relates, the devil in the shape of a wolf. The third portion of the rite brought another sort of exposure into play, plunging the infant into the freezing waters of a nearby river. This ordeal was the means by which to verify that the fairies had in fact exchanged the 2 infants, in exchange that the mother was not permitted to witness directly.
Yeah, I can see why. Yeah, I guess they thought that a belief they think is that a fairy mother who had like switched out their own child, for a human child was still a mother, and if the fairies saw that her fairy child was being like drowned in the river or being like left out in a dangerous thing, they'd be like no, and they would like come out with like the other baby and be like, all right, I'll trade you. But
the chat is killing me tonight. So bros, he says the innocent dog, the fall of the sun. Yeah.
Oh my god.
And yes, Faunus does have goat legs. Fawns in general, they have goat qualities. So yeah, Faunus does as well. Also, to Brozy, who says not playing step kids in the car. Yeah, I mean SJ is like generally not for kids to listen to, let's say. So but yeah, maybe some apps. I don't know which ones, but not most. Anyway, yeah. So the goal of the ritual was of a piece with the broader Chinese traditions to compel the spirits of the forest, the Faunos, to take the child back to the fairy child. They had take back the fairy child that had earlier placed in the human child's cradle and return the human child to its birth mother via a ritual cradle, the tiny bed of straw on the shrine's forest floor. Here, as with all changeling rituals, the ritual actors were exclusively female, and so we should assume that these traditions were passed down from generation to generation by women. Underlying these practices was the assumption that maternal affection was an emotion common to all creatures. Exposing the changeling infant to the elements, even whipping it with young tree branches, was unproblematic because it was understood the fairy mother, refusing to allow her infant's life to be placed at risk, would feel compelled by her maternal instincts to rescue the child and make the exchange.
I mean... Even if true, I feel like how would we
really
even know the
sense,
fairy
though,
mother? Like she gave up her own child.
The fairy mother, did exchange it, and she obviously is willing to, do that. So
she seems to want the human baby,
exactly,
not the changeling baby. They're just whatever. They're a prop to trick humans, I guess.
Yeah.
Or they have some purpose to like maybe they do have some purpose. They have some evil purpose to work in the world. What was the lore around changelings? I guess Merlin, maybe this character was a changeling, but like what was it meant? Was there a fairy agenda that people hypothesized as to like what would the changeling kind of grow up to do? Would it be like a sus sorcerer or cast spells on people or be evil, or are they just like a person who doesn't know they're a fairy? And I mean, Martin Luther thought they didn't have souls, but like but before that, like for the people that would do devils, these rituals, like I mean, I guess they would be like devils on the inside and not have a soul. So that's what's really scary about it. It's not just that it's a different child, but it's it's a different species and like a not ensouled one. I guess fairies didn't have souls in the, in medieval Europe. It's kind
I'm
of
not sure
unclear.
if fairy. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's different like Christian beliefs around like the nature of fairies.
Like in a way, they are
Yeah,
souls. They're
Augustine
like
like has
disembodied
some kind
souls.
of idea about them, right? That he talks about at the beginning of this chapter. That like,
Hmm.
how did he like get them? Yeah, like Sylvans and fauns were demonic incubi that copulated with human
Right.
women, right? So I guess they were demonic. So I guess in
They're
that's
kind of
if the
hybrid.
Christians like demons are angels, basically, right? Fallen angels. So yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, they are.
Marcianus Capella said, "Where the earth is accessible to man, it is crowded with the ancient beings who inhabit the woods and forests,
Yeah, I
groves,
read that
lakes, springs,
part.
and rivers." Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So there you go. Um,
yeah.
yeah,
But the
yeah.
specific, like, yeah, like what the changeling. I mean, I guess like in that sense, if the changeling was going to be is going to grow up to do evil things that the fairies want it to do, then maybe they'd be like, no, like, like they wanted that they don't want that, fairy child. It's an inside person, it's doing an inside role as like a human in the community. It's a
Yeah, I don't
spy.
know.
It's
He
doing
doesn't really mention
fairy
any
COINTELPRO.
traditions of like the changeling like growing up and like because I feel like if the parents realize that it's a changeling, they like notice really fast, and it only happens before baptism, I guess, right? Or well, for Christians, that's like what they think.
I think so.
So
I think that's
it
the
happened like they
rule.
get in there before
There's a window.
baptism, and then if you baptize, so it had to be like for a very brief window of time, and if you realize it, then you're either gonna like kill it, doing like dunking it, and like in this particular case, there's probably other different like changeling beliefs, but like or you're gonna successfully exchange it. So maybe people generally didn't find out what happened. Um,
Yeah,
Although
I'd
there
like to
was like
know.
way, way later, I feel like either in the 19th or early 20th century, there was that murder, Bridget Cleary, right?
Wait, that sounds
That was like
familiar.
pretty recent. They call her like the last witch killed in Ireland, but she wasn't really a
Oh,
witch.
okay.
She was like, killed like for being a changeling, I think. Um, and she was
When
like
was
an adult
this?
woman. Let me look it up.
Like the
Uh,
1800s or?
no, I think it might have been later than that. Let me see.
Oh,
Oh yeah, it
wow.
was. It was the very, very late 19th century. 1895 was when she died.
Wow.
She was murdered by her husband. Her body was set on fire immediately after her death. The husband's stated motive was the belief that she had been abducted by fairies and replaced with a changeling, which he then killed.
Yeah. Um.
Yeah, so I guess there's an example.
Hmm.
Um,
But I guess like this was an example. Like the Saint Guinefort shrine was like an example of these usually water-based sites like wells and stuff that people around Europe in various regions of Europe, I think France and in Belgium, but then also in parts of Ireland, would use, and that eventually became called like rag wells. At least that's what White says, that there's a common thread going between these. He says where yeah, basically like people come and they leave like pieces of their clothing hung up on trees near a water site, believing that that will heal the ills of children or like adults who are sick. But I guess the practice happens across several continents. The practice of hanging rags and articles of clothing in bushes, particularly in the vicinity of healing wells and springs, and of driving nails into trees, has persisted down to the present day in several coastal regions of Celtic Europe, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, France, and Belgium.
I mean, that's also a thing, like even in Africa, right? Like like using like driving nails into an effigy to like, discipline a spirit, right?
Right,
Like
right. Didn't we see some at the
I think
museum
we
in
were just at the
Boston?
MFA.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in the
yeah. We
mask
saw like
room.
an example of that. Yeah. Or it
Right,
was like the
right.
African like art room or something. And they did have
Right.
masks there too. Yeah.
Right, right. And yeah, there definitely are some that have like nails driven into them. That the one we saw there was for a specific purpose. It wasn't like a sympathetic magic, like sort of a voodoo doll where, like a poppet that you put pins in.
No, there was like a spirit in it, and you like punish the spirit or like make it do what you want by like
Yeah.
driving nails into it, basically as like a
Yeah.
petition kind of. I feel like we've read about that like exact practice a couple times.
Yeah.
Like driving nails into an effigy.
Right.
It reminds me of the Greg Newkirk movie
The unbinding.
The unbinding. Where he was,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
trying
That's
to
true. They did a
release
lot of
the.
nail driving in that.
Well,
Uh,
they took the nails
oh,
out
you're right. They
of
took the weird like
because they
Wotan
believed that,
like
like, there was, like,
statue
a
or whatever
good,
the
like,
fuck.
mother goddess, like, locked inside that doll,
Yeah,
or
the
like that
Azov
wooden
battalion
statue. Yeah, exactly.
doll. That's right.
Yeah. They believe that, like, the benevolent Ukrainian mother goddess of, like, Nazism was locked in there. And,
They just had
yeah,
to let it out.
yeah,
Wow, we
exactly.
got
Which is
blocked over
crying
that
out
one.
for help. Yeah.
Um, but they do note here that like these so-called ragwells, existed well into like the 17th, 18th, 19th century, and it says that while in the wake of their Christianization, these sanctuaries came to be identified with the saints of the church, it is reasonable to assume, as most historians and ethnographers have done, that before these became venues for Christian miracles, they were remarkable sanctuaries whose healings were attributed to the power of the place itself, if not that of the pagan daemon, whose Lucas it originally was. And
In
yeah,
fact,
that's.
yeah. Well, now that I think about it, yeah, it was, like, literally in that movie. It was like a water associated goddess named, like, I don't know, like Mara or something, that, like,
Mhm.
was that, like, stole and ate children, right? Like, it was like a child stealer.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting. I forgot
I
about
believe.
that.
Yeah.
Well, she did it in a cool way. She was
No, it was
actually
fine. She
as
didn't mean
religious
to. I
as
don't know.
fools. Um,
Yeah. Um, yeah.
let's see.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, interesting. A lot of these traditions after died out following World War II, or, the decades following World War II, like in France, blah blah blah. Yeah, he kind of like hypothesized that as a wealth of documents of the medieval church attest, attempts to eradicate the pagan veneration of trees, groves, and springs in northern and western Europe were largely unsuccessful. Although all forms of veneration at these pagan shrines were banned by the 4th century Theodosian Code, banned again by Pope Gregory in the 590s, and condemned by monks and priests from across the Christian world over centuries that followed, it has never died out entirely. As the data reviewed above indicate, identifying these sites with its own saints and martyrs became a rearguard strategy for converting the peasantry to Christianity. Interesting. St. Stephen's is, however, the sole extant medieval record to link such practices to the healing of children or to their recovery from fairy abductors. So,
Yeah, and
yeah.
so then his whole thing is that, like, this relates to, like, he connects it to the South Asian context,
Mm-hmm.
where he says, like, there is like a formal comparison he's going to make between Western European and South Asian iconographies with tree shrines.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the 8th century Vita of the 7th century Saint Amandus, we read that a future bishop of Maastricht once visited the home of an old woman who, seeking to cure her blindness, had been worshiping a tree consecrated to a demon. Condemning her pagan practice, Amandus had the tree cut down and healed her through the power of Christ. Also mentioned in the narrative is the demon's image, or its idol, idolus, which appears in one of two manuscript illuminations from Valenciennes depicting this miracle. It's in plate 15. Here, the representation of the idolus as a head and profile atop a cubical base at the foot of a tree bears comparison with a 1st century CE image from the Mathura region of northern India. The subject of the right half of this bas relief has generally been interpreted as a one-faced Eka Mukta Shiva Lingam, that face being shown in profile atop a cubical brick base at the foot of a tree. On the left half, two dwarf-like beings are shown facing a badly damaged human figure holding a basket. I will return to the second grouping shortly in the context of what appears to be a modern-day survival of this practice. And he goes on there, like, comparing the representations of the tree demons. It's like, just like a head, like on a tree, basically. And he compares that to, like, kind of with the way the demons look in the Saint Stephen manuscripts, like with them kind of like stealing. Not Saint Stephen, Saint Lawrence.
Right.
Even though Saint Stephen also
St.
was one,
Lars. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. The tree worship, yeah, he says has like a very long and varied history in many places, from West Africa to Ukraine,
Yeah.
in Central Asia, the early Buddhism,
Yeah.
yeah, India,
Definitely showing his Indo-Europeanist like, stripes here. He says he's talking about a Muslim practice
uh-huh.
where in Xinjiang He says, in the Muslim world, tombs of Sufi saints from the Balkans to northeastern India, but most especially in Central Asia, have featured tugs, votive offerings comprising strips of cloth, pieces of clothing, flags, and cloth tassels affixed to poles, tree trunks, branches, or prayer screens. Here, each piece of cloth corresponds to a votive prayer, and in Xinjiang and Western China, the flapping of cloth flags in the wind is thought to drive away evil spirits. This apotropaic function notwithstanding, Alexander Pappas has strongly argued that the symbolism of the tugs was originally martial, a battlefield standard. The tug was an early modern emblem of the Sufi saint's role as a sovereign defender of the Muslim faith. However, as Pappas further notes, the Muslim tugs of Central Asia also resemble prayer flags and other Buddhist cultic paraphernalia that predated Islam's penetration into the region by nearly a millennium. It's always a tell to me when people talk about Islam's penetration. They always use that word. Like why? It penetrated. It violated the glory of India.
Yeah. It was.
It's a foreign.
They were assaulted.
Import.
They were assaulted.
It's like.
Yeah. They
see, this is what I'm talking about. There really isn't like this monogenesis thing does kind of just like end up being diffusionism, but whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, so I'm looking at a lot of.
He goes. Yeah, I'm trying to think of the best part to read here. So yeah, he keeps going about this. Like, yeah, there's a part about the cradles. Let me get to the cradle part, I think.
I'm looking at all the different pics that he's got here of like demons throughout various cultural contexts in various countries. Oh yeah, Saint Stephen suckled by white doe with like a little tiny devil man like flying.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the
over
art.
The
he
church.
has like, some great like full color. Yeah, this is I think I'll just read from the middle here. I won't I won't recapitulate what exact text this is, but another child abduction is cast a decisive role in the birth of a king named Jarasandha. A story from the MBH tells how the future king, through a piece of magic gone awry, has been born in two halves from the wombs of two queens. Exposed outside the royal palace, the two semi-babies are snatched up by a child abductress named Jara, Decrepitude, the better to eat them. In order to heft the two little monsters more easily, she fuses the halves into one, so the infant is named Jarasandha, fused by Jara. The newborn prince, now a complete human, is recovered by the king, to whom the demoness addresses the following soliloquy. I am a female guardian, Rakshasi, who dwells eternally in every human home. House goddess is my name. Verily, I was created by the self-generated, possessed of, that's Shiva, I guess, possessed of a divine form. I have been established for the destruction of demons. Prosperity dwells in the home of him who draws from the wall. I guess the image of me, it's in all brackets, but draws me on the wall and my son, accompanied by his youths, his entourage of demonic youths, in brackets. Otherwise, he suffers loss. Dwelling in your house, my lord, I am worshipped perpetually. Some of the data included in Jira's speech are also evocative of the common modern-day South Asian assumption that spirits of the dead, including children, often do not depart to the world of the ancestors, but take up residence as household deities in their former homes. These potentially malevolent bairns impose their whims on their families, which in their case are satisfied through feeding and coddling, in return for which they provide advice and grant blessings. Interestingly, in southern Rajasthan, such children are referred to as patar, cognate of patur, the blanket Sanskrit term for forefather or adult ancestor. As Anne Grodson's Gold explains, according to widespread Hindu understandings of reincarnation, great-grandfathers reincarnate as great-grandsons. All right. This is like Strauss-Howe generational theory. This being the case, there's an identity between ancestors and the lingering spirits of the juvenile dead. A similar dynamic appears to be at play in coastal Andhra Pradesh, where the spirits of children and young adults who have died premature deaths are called virulu, heroes, a term generally reserved for the spirits of adult warriors who die gloriously in battle. Deified beings of limited power, these young dead heroes return to haunt their families, which they only harm if they are not offered the respect they feel is their due. We may compare the relationship between human parents and household deities that either protect or abduct the children born there, or else are the spirits of children previously born there, with a motif found in a number of Western European changeling narratives. In a 19th century account from Upper Brittany, when a woman discovers that her child has been replaced by a changeling, she cries out, "Nasty little witch, I'm going to kill you." but the fairy who was in the attic called to her, "Don't kill mine and I'll bring yours back. Don't kill mine and I'll bring yours back."
There you go. Oh,
Here,
yeah, okay.
here once again, fairies are understood to be the mothers of changelings who are none other than fairy infants. As for the fairies themselves, many specialists of medieval literature and modern folklore concur that the fairies that seduced and spirited away errant knights of courtly romance were none other than the ancestral dead of pagan Europe. Fairyland was a survival, a memory of pre-Christian worlds of the dead, with fairies playing the role of psychopomps and spirit beings. As such, abduction by alluring fairy maidens was tantamount to a temporary or permanent relocation to the worlds of the dead. As we have seen, these characterizations ran counter to church doctrine. I mean, it makes sense in a way because, like, you can even see that like in modern like parapsychology, right? Like, these days, if you like get like let's say like Ed and Lorraine Warren, obviously they're dead, but like the equivalent of that to come to their house, like ghosts are kind of like boring, or like they don't like they don't get the clicks or whatever these people are in it for. So it's always like a demon, or
Yeah.
you can see the same thing with like I mean, there definitely are like stories like that like circulate in like Muslim cultures about like the spirits of the dead interacting with the living and things like that. But a lot of the time like things like ghost stories basically are jinn stories in like sort of modern global Muslim culture a lot of the time. So it kind of like makes
Interesting.
sense that
It's
like there's this kind of displacement of like phenomena that could be ascribed to the dead into like the fairy domain.
right, right. When I think, yeah, I mean, I guess it's hot right now to like talk about demons and, in like Western culture, like American culture, certainly in the movies, more than just like a ghost.
Um,
Ghosts almost became cute after a while.
yeah, I think like
Like
I mean, I
Casper.
guess you do sometimes like I don't know, yeah, you do people still talk about the ghosts of the dead and stuff like that, but I feel like what's real like people are really into now is not ghosts. Um,
Or, ultra terrestrials, that kind of thing.
exactly, yeah, that's what people are into. People are into Jinn.
Yeah,
Jinn are coming back.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Cryptids,
but
Dogman, all of it.
Dogman,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of popular invocation of fairies among TikTok. Oh, I bet. I
Oh,
bet there's
yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
invocation of fairies among TikTok witches.
Yeah, I think
Um,
fairies
I could just
are as
picture it
popular as
now,
ever.
like, if you want to deal with the Fey folk, like, you need to know these things. Like, first of all, like, don't be,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
exactly. Or you remember that old Irish guy we watched in that like documentary? Like, oh,
yeah,
we're talking to the fairies, yeah, and he was like so matter of fact about it, about like
yeah,
the Fey folk and how you can't, if you bulldoze their mounds, your farm will fail. Everybody knows
it
that,
will, yeah.
you know. Yeah, but I think it is
I
coming
remember
back.
that,
The younger
yeah.
generation, they're fairy pilled.
Um, yes, it's many religious studies scholars are really smart assholes. I mean, some are smart and kind, and some are dumb and kind, and some are dumb assholes. It runs the gamut.
Sure.
But yeah. So yeah. Anyway, then we talked about Jean-Paul Doulet, who came to a similar conclusion.
Hmm.
Um, bringing to light the popular links between changelings and the spirits of unbaptized dead children. I guess yeah, it also kind of makes sense. Yet, as is the case in India, these infant dead also end up melting into the faceless throng of the ancestral dead, including spirits who have long been dead. We see this in a leitmotif of European changeling narratives, which describe the changeling as a ravenous yet sickly infant with the wrinkled and decrepit features of a centenarian.
Yeah.
Congenitally mute, the changeling is made to abruptly reveal its greatly advanced age through a subterfuge on the part of the abducted infant's mother. I like this story. The motif has the woman
Hmm.
in the house setting about the boiling water using eggshells as cooking pots, brewing beer in nutshells, or engaging in some other absurd form of cuisine. Non-plus is such an incongruous sight. The changeling utters a stock phrase, which recurs in hundreds of local and regional variants, as exemplified in a 19th century folktale from Picardy. I may be a shade over 900 years old, but I've never seen so many little pots. Following which, the changeling fairy returns the mother's biological child to its place in the cradle. Wow.
This
It's kind of
sounds
like, yeah, like
like
a
like what is it called? Like Italian brain rot.
Rumpelstiltskin.
It sounds like Italian brain rot, like something that would happen without narrative explanation. Like mother is like cooking breakfast in eggshells, and then like the old baby, the like old person baby jumps up and goes, "That's so weird," and then like end of scene. like a ballerina
What?
cappuccino or
Oh,
something.
you mean like AI brain
Yeah,
rot?
like
I
AI
see, I see.
generated like fairy tale. Like
Okay,
that it
okay,
is very
yeah.
odd. That like why is the mother cooking with
Well,
like
because that's how you deal with, that's how you get the, because it's like Rumpelstiltskin, when you get him to like reveal his name, that's how it's kind of like you got to trick him, and then like you have power over him in some way. Like once he like reveals that he's a fairy, then somehow like there's still
oh,
logic to
okay.
it, like so you do something crazy what makes him go like I've never seen this in all my 900 years, and then you're like, ha, gotcha,
Not a
you
very
know.
disciplined fairy, honestly. Yeah.
Well, he's only 900, which I
That's
guess is
true.
a baby in fairy years, I guess.
Wow. Okay. So
Although I don't know,
okay,
maybe
I
this is
get
one
it.
that's like a shapeshifter. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought like like when they talk, like do they suddenly lose like I would assume that baby was wearing like some kind of magical mask that made them appear to be like a real baby up until that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
It's
then when
kind of like the
they
stories we read in the Big Cats episode about the cat who like suddenly talks. Um,
right.
like
Yeah.
when like the master comes home and says like, "Oh, like someone like a cat came up to me on the road and told me to say like tell Tom Tomb that Tim Tom is dead, and then he says that to his wife like, and the cat overhears and goes like Tim Tomb is dead, like then I'm the king of the cats, and like he runs out,
Oh my
like
God!
it's
Wow,
kind of
it's
like
like the
that.
Toy Story of
um
cats. Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
but
No, I guess I see. Oh yeah, once they're exposed, their magic doesn't work anymore, and then they're like, they look
exactly, they're
old. I see.
exposed, yeah.
Yeah.
So but anyway, yeah, so while fairy lovers were a staple of courtly romance litter, it was another sort of fairy, which Roulette has termed the obstetric fairy, that is the most relevant here. In both the pagan world and the imaginaire of medieval romance, the birth of a child was attended by two sets of fairies: the womb fairies that assisted or interfered in childbirth, and the fairy godmothers that
Oh,
determined the newborn's
oh,
future.
wow.
Heiresses to both the Matronae, the ancient mother goddesses known throughout the medieval West, and the Greco-Roman Parsae and Fates, these intervened at two levels, both aiding infants to come into the world and endowing them with whatever qualities they chose, both negative and positive. In return for these gifts, they expected the newborn's parents to offer them a feast, but woe to those who would disrespect them in any way, however slight, for these petulant goddesses were notorious for avenging themselves on the child, afflicting it with defects that would carry it to its often early grave. This theme, attested in medieval literature as early as the 14th century, remained a fixture of Western European folklore down into the last century. I mean, we all know the story of Sleeping Beauty and stuff like that.
Of course.
Yeah, it's still a really popular story,
Disney
honestly, and
kept
it
it going.
maps onto that exactly.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Is there anything more about child abductions, by fairies or anything else? Let's see.
Anything more in the child abduction chapter?
Yeah.
I think there might be. Let me look at my
It's
notes and
funny. It
see if
kind
there's
of
anything in this chapter I
implies
wanted
like
to
it was
cover.
like medieval and modern child abductions. It was like, are we going to be drawing a link up to the present day of fairies? But I guess it's not quite what his thing is. Yeah. The next chapter, perilous fountains. These fountains are perilous. Yeah, it's always around the water sites where these things tend to this phenomenon tends
Yeah.
to proliferate.
Um, Yeah, there is one more part I wanted to get to. Let me bring it up. Sorry, apologies to the chat. It's live radio, live radio. Um,
Live radio,
yeah, they
folks.
are talking about the water. The child is floated on a raft in the water near the goddess's shrine. This is a South Asian one.
Hmm.
One or more children are placed in the raft, which is already floating on the water, and one or more adults move the raft around the water. At some places where children are floated on the raft, it is that the raft used to circle around in the water and then come back to shore on its own. The rite of floating babies and children on a raft seems to be a kind of attenuated or mimic sacrifice. The fact that the child's clothes are removed and thrown into the water adds to this impression. The clothes seem to represent the child, who is placed on the water when the clothes are thrown into it. The babies and children who are floated on the rafts are thereby offered to the goddess. Although their parents do get them back, their parents must nevertheless first give them up, surrendering them to the goddess in the form of the water of her river. A
Hmm.
frequent motif in the lore about floating babies and children in the water is the child's parents must not become frightened. The children who are floated on the raft are thereby being entrusted to the goddess, being put under her protection and care, but also into her power. Oh yeah, and he tells a story about the woman who you know, um yeah, there's some good stories here, yeah. But the woman who you know, like she you know, like the a woman, due to fear, she lost her child on the raft because she was afraid of losing it, and then
Oh
like I guess it
no.
wasn't enough trust, so the child never came back. And so then she
No.
made a second vow saying, if I get another son, I will float him on the raft again. So in 2 years' time, the woman got another son and he was floated on the raft. But this time, even after he began to be floated, the woman did not get worried. After the raft had circled around 5 times, it came back to the bank. In it were the first child and this child. The woman got back both children.
Wow. Happy ending. Wow.
Yeah, he's talking about another scholar, Feldhaus. One of Feldhaus's informants recounted a dream she had during pregnancy concerning a son who had died shortly after childbirth, involving a group of Asara called the Mothers of Children. Her dream is eerily evocative of European changeling narratives. When she was pregnant with her fourth child, a son, she dreamed about the Asara. I saw water, she said, water like this. And in the water there was a nice cradle, and in that cradle a child was lying. I would try to take him, and she, an Asara, would take him from the other side. I would go to take him, and she would take him over there. A second one took him over there, and a third one took him over there. Over there is, of course, the world of the dead, of dead babies carried off by spirit world mothers, with the cradle representing the protected yet incandescent space within the domestic sphere and a woman's body, where infants are subject to abduction. In a zero-sum game in which there is no room within the funeral program, or cradle, for the auspicious coconut child and the destructive ghost, the recovery of the one requires the ouster of the other. As in the case in Western Europe, these Western Indian rituals of exchange are the means to that end. Yeah. Interesting.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Yeah. And, you know, he talks about, like, it might be good to read, like, his summary of these things. Yeah, I'll just, like,
Sure.
yeah, I wanted to read this one. Like, you know, there are no changeling narratives in South Asia. However, as narrativized in the birth of Krishna, in utero exchanges of human and demonic embryos were not extrinsic to classical Indic systems of knowledge. Here, the malevolent spirit brings to steal away human infants invariably do so fatally, either in the womb during the first days, weeks, or months of life, or during the first days, weeks, months, or life. Nearly all of these beings are female, and they are collectively known by a range of by now familiar names: mothers, female Caesars, yakshis, and yoginis. These demonesses usually possess their victims, entering into their bodies and feeding on them from within. Identify with such fatal childhood diseases as smallpox and wasting fevers. They are also notorious agents of miscarriage, stillbirth, and various childbirth complications. Revenge is a dish relished cold here, since, as MBH's treatise on demonology clearly states, these Jataharinis, child abductresses, are often cast as the ravening spirits of women who had died in childbirth in a previous life. Denied their biological destiny of maternity, they now feel authorized to abduct, kill, and eat the babies of living human mothers. Unlike the European fairies, these are mothers with no offspring of their own to exchange, and so their vengeance results in the death of their tiny human victims, either in their biological mother's wombs or shortly after birth.
Right. So this is the poisonous envy kind of motive of they just want to watch the world burn. They want other women to fail. They're not supporting other, you know.
Yes, they aren't. Yeah, they do steal the baby, but they take it to the spirit world, which is like he's analogizing to the fairy world.
Okay.
You know. So then he goes through this whole like comparison of all the rituals that he discusses, where he has like this whole elaborate system of like underlines and italicized and bolded words, you know, where he just kind of compares the different elements of the beliefs and also the rituals. I don't know if we need to read that necessarily because I feel like people kind of see the parallels, probably, but I mean they are there. But I guess you know that's all by way of, you know, saying that the most probable explanation for these parallel traditions is, you know, in basically like a homologous sequence of ritual acts attested at two extremities of the Indo-European world, you know, that may be viewed as survivals of a body of practice observed by speakers of the Proto-Indo-European language whose Western branch, which includes the Celtic, Romance, Germanic, and Slavic languages, split off from the Indo-Iranian languages some 5,000 years ago. So, all right, maybe that's one explanation. It also could be that there's Jinn out there, and they're stealing babies, folks.
What I mean, or it could be both. It could be both, right?
It could be both.
This could
like,
be an effective practice to combat Jinn, and also this was spread across a culture. You know, this also does remind me a little bit of like the quest for Atlantis, like this idea of a lost civilization and that we can't even like prove the existence of, or find evidence of, but it feels like there are legends about some kind of great civilization in the past. The Greeks of course had this that was destroyed by like a natural calamity.
Yeah.
I mean, there is also the Bronze Age collapse, which was a broader, still kind of mysterious.
And that's
right?
basically where like he thinks the Proto-Indo-European thing would, be. Like
that
in
would
the
be
Bronze
sort of
Age,
the fissure point of the common civilization, like the beginning of the split, kind of would be
it would
around
like
the
basically
Bronze
it
Age
would
collapse.
be like I guess so. Yeah, I guess it was, that's like where some of these things I guess originate is the idea. Yeah.
Right. And that was that about 4,000 years ago, like 2000 BCE? The Bronze Age collapse, or was it sooner
When
than
did the
that?
Bronze Age collapse happen? I think it was maybe later than that. Let me see.
Might have been.
Yeah, it was the 12th century BC.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, so
okay.
earlier than that is what I meant.
So
Yeah.
30, about almost 3,300 years ago, I guess. Yeah. Yeah, which is kind of that'd be funny. That'd be a fun thing to look into one day, right? Because there's like there's ambiguity and controversy about what actually caused it, right?
Yeah, definitely. I don't really know too much about it. Like, yeah.
I feel like it gets
wonder what
invoked.
caused it. Yeah.
It gets invoked these days for various people and purposes. I think there's even like a QAnon vibe about it, that this is some kind of horrible event that might happen again. Like we're gonna have like societies can just collapse like that, like very rapidly. I mean, you could even like say that, oh, maybe this will mirror like climate change in the 21st century or something like that. Or if there was kind of like nuclear war, it makes you think of like, oh, if there's a nuclear war.
Oh, people say like
then,
there's ancient aliens like cause for it, or like ancient,
I don't know if anybody says that. I'm just thinking of it as like a parallel to like it feels.
Oh yeah, people
or maybe
do
people
blame
are
it on
searching
the sea
for a
people.
MacGuffin.
The sea people
Right,
is a common
the sea people,
explanation.
the unknown the sort of mystery population that just went and like kind of like the Vikings on steroids went and sacked all these Mediterranean cities and caused just wide scale like economic and like social collapse. And then defeating the sea peoples. I mean, the sea peoples like there were sea people, right? But it's sort of like unclear
but they're very
who they
mysterious,
were.
like who they were, where they came from, what's going on.
Honestly, that's sus. It's sus. I mean, it's like you had the Mongols do that, but then we know something about the Mongols. I mean, I guess
we know a lot about them, really.
The advantage of the sea, you can just sail away and be mysterious.
I guess, yeah.
But anyways, yeah.
Yeah, there's 4 Ugaritic texts that like mention them. Yeah.
Interesting.
But so it might be worth talking about because it's like this last chapter like is kind of interesting, or like last proper chapter before the conclusion, where he talks about this like sort of myth theme, I guess you could call it. I'll just read his like summary version, this kind of, or like identikit version that he has, like which just kind of combines all the different accounts he talks about. There's like one version by like a Central Asian like Muslim alchemist. That's my favorite one, obviously. But like it's the he like was a Hindu Tamil who like converted to Islam to like further his alchemical knowledge.
Wow.
And he like went to like Mecca. To like this mysterious fountain that was like spoken highly of by the Arabs, and in his studies. But then like he was like attacked. I'll just read the because it's it spans a bunch of different versions. So this is like what he says is like common between the versions, and I'll even read the sort of parentheses where he accounts for all the differences that actually do exist. In a distant western land, a naked maiden on horseback, or else a mounted band of men clad in gold leaf, or a lone male alchemist, attracts the attention of a living, sentient fluid mineral being by passing or standing or flying. That's, the Muslim alchemist like takes a pill and he's like flying over. But anyway, so in proximity to the well, spring or sea in which this, being, this living, sentient fluid mineral being resides. It's kind of giving Cyclopedia vibes, honestly. Possessive of desire or intention.
Looking into your gazing into the oil to like see the future is also very Cyclopedia.
possessed of a desire to marry, catch, possess, cling to the golden armor of, or assault the approaching humans, that living being, who is identified with a daemon, rushes after her, or him, or them. He pursues his quarry, but when, after a specific distance, he turns around and attempts to return to his abode, he is trapped in a naturally occurring depression or hollow or set of well shafts that have been dug to that end by the people of that land. Now reduced to the state of an inert mineral or metal, he is no longer referred to as a living sentient being or daemon. The natives of the land then possess that mineral in order to stabilize and optimize it.
Interesting. So, like, the spirits have something to do with extraction of natural resources.
Well, they are the natural resources, and the people like then like trap them, and like basically trick them into like a containment, like tank or whatever. And then they get trapped in their a different state. I'll read this part. This is actually kind of like
So
illuminating.
oil is gin.
Like it is like a daemon, basically. Yeah.
Oh my god.
A djinn. Yeah.
Silicon.
A clue to the real world source of this myth theme may be found in the 5th to 6th century lexicographer Hesychius of Alexandria's entry on the obscure Greek term napas, an oil producing well in the mountains of Persia. Hesychius further links napas with the word naphtha, a term the Greeks borrowed from an ancient Semitic language, Aramaic, Akkadian, or Syriac. The term naftum, which is found on Babylonian cuneiform text dating from the 18th century BCE, denoted a type of oil or heavy bitumen pitch that was set on fire and used as military ordnance. Working from Hesychius' etymology, Pouvel suggested that perhaps oil seepage and oil flares on the Caspian shores were not unknown to the Indo-European proto-habitat, with the Indo-European theonym nepot being the source of mundane petrochemical terminology. While geothermal activity is a geological datum in this region of the Indo-European homeland, the same cannot be said for many other sites reviewed in this chapter, a fact that would appear to underline my claim of a moment ago concerning the link between these mythic variants and crustal geology. With the exception of Vedic Apa-Napat liturgies, every version of the Indo-European proto-myth is linked to a specific aquatic lucus and to a local daemon of the site. Manatea in Greece, the well of Asbama in Turkey, the Alban Lake in Italy, the source of the River Boyne in Ireland, the thermal spas at Grans and Autun in France, as well perhaps as the Aral Sea on the border of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, or the Helmand River in Afghanistan. With the exception of the sites in France, Greece, and Turkey, none of these is known for geothermal activity or violent eruptions of subterranean waters. Trinity Well in County Kildare, the source of Ireland's greatest river, the Boyne, is a placid spring most notable for its immediate proximity to 3 of Ireland's primary Neolithic burial tumuli. And in fact, while the flooding of rivers is common in the Mediterranean lands, it is unknown in Ireland. Additional proof of such were needed that neither the Dishan Shah's account of the flooding of the Nectan's well nor the death of Eilchad McMurida narrative of the flooding of Grey Thicket waters originated in Britain or Ireland. So anyway, basically, this takes him to this idea that like this all originates from like a mud volcano, basically.
Oh yeah, in Azerbaijan, right?
Yeah.
The highest concentration of mud volcanoes in the entire world is on the shores of the Caspian.
The Well of Death,
and a huge oil drilling site. As you know, I mean, Dick Cheney was very active trying to get in there and drill for oil in the 90s.
Yeah, there you go.
And the Soviets kind of intentionally drained the Aral Sea over the course of like several decades to the point where it's not there anymore, which is what happens when is that like bulldozing a fairy mound on like a national scale?
Oh, I guess it's in Pakistan, not in Azerbaijan.
Okay. I think
Pakistan's Chandrakoop is the one that he says is the mud volcano.
Okay. I thought I read somewhere else that it says Azerbaijan's Black Sea coastline boasts the world's highest concentration of mud volcanoes, while its Caspian coastline has long been renowned for its geothermal eruptions of naphtha, particularly around Baku. Yeah, it kind of sounds like napalm. I wonder if there's an etymological term. But anyways.
Yeah, so he basically says that like maybe like there's volcanic eruptions in the Indo-European homeland that like cause this idea of like fire and water that we see in all these myths.
Interesting.
But yeah.
I guess that informs.
Yeah, but it is interesting actually that we have this idea. I mean, I don't know, maybe Nagarastani was aware of this, but it is interesting that we have this idea of like literally like oil as like a daemon that like has a sentience
Mm-hmm.
and then like comes out of the earth and like, then is trapped and then like used as like a geostrategic resource. It's interesting.
Or does it,
Um,
or does it want to be,
yeah,
like when it
exactly.
burned, does it free the spirit of the djinn that is trapped inside of it?
Yeah,
Every
well,
time it's burned,
yeah,
then it just wants to like be
exactly. Yeah, is
freed.
it? Yeah.
Similar thing with, silicon,
It's
right?
crazy that like you
what
would have to like
computer
offer a
chips are.
virgin maiden to like tempt the oil out of the ground, and then like you would like it's us. Like it's funny.
Yeah,
Concept.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess not to be overly animistic. On the other hand, why does Saturn have that eye? Like,
Explain.
sometimes, yeah. So you think about the rare earth minerals that comprise computer technology and all of the technological innovations that dominate our lives now. Like, you have a similar thing of like rare metals that have almost like a kind of a, trees of life inscribed on them in the form of like these microcircuits, right? And then are used to power these machines that now can sort of generate cybergin like and apparitions and fake fake consciousness being like illusory beings with consciousness to interact with that are actually a mirror, like staring into a vat of oil and seeing the reflection of like the demon mother goddess that wants to steal your children. You can see, just on a metaphorical level, that maybe our ancient ancestors, maybe they understood something about the world. I don't know.
They definitely understood something about the world.
There's
No
something
question
that was
about it.
understood. Yeah, obviously we know a lot more in specifics, but it's they must have taken this like seriously. I don't know. They must have taken it seriously. People around the world still take it seriously to varying degrees. It's not actually like fully eradicated, even in Christianized places where now it's like a shrine to Saint so and so. You can still see, or the Catholic process. I remember my mom was telling me about. I think it's like Saint Joseph, I want to say, or maybe Saint Anthony. There's one involved when people are trying to like sell your house that like realtors are obsessed with, where you like have to bury a statue head down in your yard when you're like right when you're about to like put your house on the market, and people swear by it. You know what I mean? And then like you have to
Yeah.
take out, then you have to unbury it after the house is sold, and then you have to like put it up somewhere, in your new abode wherever you go, and that's supposed to be like good luck. And it's like I don't know where that originated, but like it seems to be a kind of like pan-Catholic belief of a couple different European countries that it's hard.
It's good luck,
Well,
but do Catholics believe in luck?
that's the thing.
It
Like
sounds like Lucky
technically
Charms to me.
speaking,
Sounds like
well, I'm
Lucifer.
sure a capital C
Lu-
Christian who thinks Catholics are like pagan Mary worshippers,
Yeah.
like probably would consider that satanic, like the way was it Katy Perry's parents wouldn't let her eat Lucky Charms?
Yeah, Lucky Charms. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, Catholics have always had that thing of like, well, it's like a shrine to a saint, and then it's like some very old like basically like apotropaic, like magic, right? To
Well,
like
yeah,
protect
no, it's
against
all about the
demons.
explanation. Yeah, it's like, is it,
But as long as there's like a
good
saint
luck
involved,
to
it's kind of
say,
like assumed okay. Like I mean, I guess it's just like bad luck
exactly.
to
It's
like
like,
leave
is
the
it
saint
good luck
statue.
is it good luck to pray? Like, not
Yeah.
really. Like, it's not
Yeah,
really
well,
how it's thought of, but like, you
right.
could think of it as the same,
Yeah.
thing. It's
The
like,
main
it depends
thing is to,
on how
like,
you
sell-
understand the universe, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, the main thing, which
Yeah.
almost makes me think that it has a much more modern origin, because like the fact that apparently realtors like all know about this, like and some employ it sometimes, but the fact that we're medieval peasants, like going around to realtors, like not really. So that maybe it was kind of adapted from some other adjacent use about like maybe when you were like building a house or something you would do, and it somehow got like tied up with the abode, and that like, oh, you should bury this statue upside, like head down in your yard, and then it will facilitate you selling it or getting a good price for it or something like that, like getting a fair price for your house or something like that. And yeah. Yeah, it's obviously something that does not come like straight out of like the Bible, like the older New Testament. Like it obviously comes from a kind of deeper tradition, and I guess that's why I do like about this book that it sort of critiques like the dividing line that people kind of sometimes put up between these practices that are kind of associated with like the peasantry versus like the official written like doctrines of like the beliefs of the religion that typically like, the elites are involved in like kind of gatekeeping and clarifying and like defining, that like this is something kind of off to the side that is not inextricably wrapped up in the entire like belief and structure of like ritual practice. I don't know. Am I making any sense? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's kind of like there's always like porosity like between like those things. Like there isn't like it really depends. Like in some ways, like there is like a popular culture, or like a popular like in popular in the true sense, like in the way we talk about popular culture now, everyone participates in it, like
yeah,
it's the same like type of thing. Like it can be thought of in the same way, right? Like
right,
White does like make this thing about like kind of like women versus men. Like there's this weird line he has where it's like no modern day scholar can ever understand the angst of a woman who like left her, yeah, I think I mentioned this, like leaves her child like in the woods,
right,
knowing that like a wolf might carry it off. Like it's like, well, no, yeah, I mean, he says like a modern day parentheses male scholar, and it's like, well, I mean, I think fathers probably also love their children, not to be, sexist anyway. Obviously, mothers have a special bond, but like, let's say a modern day, let's take the parentheses away and say it's like a modern day female mother, that like, that's basically like, what if, your child is sick and there's like an experimental surgery that has a
right,
risk involved,
right,
but
and you
like,
have to leave them in the hospital.
otherwise your child's gonna die. Like, that's the
Yeah, or
exact same thing,
everyone
it's not,
everyone believe from you to the doctors, everyone's saying they're going to die, and like
yeah,
it seems like that's what's going to happen. No, that I think it's a very good analogy in terms of like the social context in which these kinds of things occur. Like
yeah,
you could draw a modern parallel, and of course it's like
totally.
serious science, but it still is like not perfect. It's not like we've figured out everything, and
Or if
sometimes
you want to say like you want to do something that's like, not like serious science, what about a mother who like doesn't want to get her kid vaccinated against anything? You know? Like
that in a
you know,
way is a form of like
it's
in
just,
a way it's like
she thinks that
maybe
kid is gonna die or like be like a nonverbal autistic if like, it gets the polio vaccine or the measles
right.
vaccine.
In that
You
case
know?
it's like
Like
maybe from the perspective of that type of mother it's a refusal of a ritual, that it's like
yeah,
it's kind of an
yeah,
inverted
yeah.
thing of like
Yeah,
I
it's
need
not
to
active.
not
Yeah.
participate in this because this is a ritual. Like it's a ritual, like they're injecting the kids, folks. Like I don't want any part of it. It's part of the, that's again where it kind of dovetails with the other ideas from like Christianity about like the mark of the beast and like, but really,
Yeah,
I
or
mean,
like you
it
could say
goes
like
way older
Christian
than that.
Science does this kind of too, where like you like that's like part like it would be like corruption or like a failure of their. It's kind of like when the mother like she can't worry, she can't be afraid of what's going to happen to the kid, when she lets it go like around in the water. So it's the same type of thing where like what you don't do is also important. Like
Right, right. And fear,
like if
like
you like
freaking
take
out.
like if you take your kid to a hospital, that's like not trusting God or not like prayer, like a Christian Science framework. So it's kind of
That's true.
corruptive.
That's
Or
true.
like if you're a Scientologist and you go to the cyclos or something,
Yeah, you go to the
etc., and don't
cyclos, you're
do
done, you're cooked.
Dianetics. Yeah, you're done. You're so
You're
cooked if you go to the
done.
cyclos.
You're
Exactly.
you are a SP. You're an SP
Yeah.
if you do that. No, it's true. I mean, these things still go on today, and they are structured around like both belief and ritual practice or refusal to participate in certain ritual practices. And yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
don't
mean
know.
he does like kind of note, and I think this is kind of important, like in these respects, the relationships between oral and written account, folktale and literary work, secular literature and sacred text, mythic and historical narrative, and popular systems of knowledge and scientific ethnography have been as multi-sided as those obtaining between official and vernacular religion. The written has never supplanted the oral, nor has the highbrow ever definitively replaced the lowbrow. Rather, these have continued to cross-pollinate one another in various ways. That I think is true. Like, there's
Yeah.
like, a lot about. I think, yeah, it's true. Like, he isn't. I think an asshole in some ways. Like, you could definitely, take issue with some of what he says or some of his perspectives. But in that, and that I think is a very important like basis to do any kind of like scholarship like this, to not make not fall into these dichotomies, between like, oh, the folk and the elite or whatever.
Right. Like, I mean, that sometimes we see that in the kind of in the more popularized like modern kind of witch or occultism kind of discourse now of like,
and he does
we're
fall into that a little bit too. Like
we're the daughters of the witches that like
it's
you
kind
failed
of
to
like
burn, kind of thing,
like Margaret Murray level stuff, like at times, where it's like, oh, the secret, she's the one behind the witch cult in Europe, right? Yeah. So yeah, I was hoping I wasn't getting confused with Margaret Mead, but yeah, I was right.
Oh,
Okay,
right.
but
Yeah,
but
I almost did that.
but she but yeah, like it's that kind of thing of like, oh, there was this like peaceful, good earth maternal religion that like was like oppressed by the evil patriarchal church or whatever. And it's like, well, like we can see how like these these like female organized rituals did exist, like were as part of like sort of a Catholic practice, even if like they might have been frowned upon by like the like church officials in some cases,
right.
but like in some of these like weird practices were participated in by church officials, as we saw like in that sort of like
the priest
captromancy chapter, but at the same, but those were like Catholic practices. They were part of like a Catholic religiosity, and also one could say that like well, definitely like I could see certainly like again, like I'm saying, I do understand it, like one can understand like why this was done, but I certainly think that many of the same people who are like the witch religion was like beaten down, like they would not like be on board with like leaving your kid in the forest and then dumping him 9 times in a frozen river. And that was a female organized matriarchal witches you didn't burn practice, like, and it was the Catholic churchmen who were like, no, like fuck that, I'm like exhuming this dog and we're putting a stop to this, like, so I'm just saying it's not like a binary thing, like,
just like the Pope, and that, I mean, like the things are not so clear, like just like one dimensional as people maybe would like to make them, because I mean, it's like if you want to be that simplistic, then you're not that far off from returning with a V to like the chill goddess Baphomet holding the head of like von Stauffenberg, that like the O9A like venerate. It's like they have their own version of like there was a chill pagan, goddess cult that was like so great, but they're literally satanic Nazis, and like the good and the bad always
say
exist.
Like, how can we be fascist if we worship a goddess, which is like insane. But how can we be
which it's also not to say, I think what we also see is that maybe the blanket demonization of all of these practices is like something completely like bleh, like certain, like I think he mentions a few times in this book that certain scholars or people like throughout maybe the 19th and 20th centuries would look at certain things and think that these were like pagans like worshiping devils and like summoning demons and stuff, but then like if you look at it more closely, these are like apotropaic rituals that are about like defending against like bad spirits and demons and shit, but like sometimes that the distinction would get kind of lost because, oh well, you're summoning something. I mean, people do it the same thing with like like voodoo and West African religions and stuff like that, where it's like, oh no, they're summoning the bush devil, like they're summoning the devil, folks, like they're summoning the devil, but like except for some aberrant like strains of that like the leopard men, like kind of assassins or whatever, which are like a rare phenomenon, like normatively like magic is meant to be like protective, and there's like taboos on using it in this kind of like bad way, where you're like trying to hurt somebody, and it's like
Yeah.
often defending against bad spirits is like that's the utility of it for most people. It's like actually in an interesting way, it's like so practical. Like putting aside for a second the is it true or like is it real phenomenon. If you believe it's true, this is like a practical approach. Like when you need it in an emergency, when you kind of don't know what's going on and you suspect that there are like invisible forces, coming at you. Like whether it's a complex like psychological phenomenon where like faith actually does, like if everyone in a group believes in it enough in a way, it kind of like, I don't know. Like, I mean, there's all kinds of theories as to, or, maybe there's more material basis for something because like you've said many times, you don't fully accept this like this designation of supernatural phenomena, right?
Right. Well, yeah, I think that like if like yeah, exactly. Like everything
it's
is
real,
part
it's
of
material.
nature. Yeah, if it's real, it's part of exactly. It's a false binary that is like,
Right.
basically doesn't like nothing can fit like in that category really.
Right.
Um,
So it's not that irrational given their assumption that this is material, this is material reality they're dealing with. Like it's not completely insane. Now you could argue that like, is this a false? They tricked themselves into like thinking, into it adopting this kind of epistemology of like spirits and demons and stuff like that. Like you could have that debate for sure, absolutely.
yeah, I mean, I guess like
I
the
wouldn't leave
yeah.
my child out
Well, yeah,
be
I mean, to
switched
your
to
original
changeling,
point, like, yeah, I
like,
mean, few as I like something I also always say is that few people are like trying to be bad, like to people like people are often like trying to achieve something good. That's the thing, like with people who like like that's what it comes to like religious debates or anything like this. It's you can even say like, oh, like what is something like think about like it's revisionism, or something like that, or it's like yeah, like think about like debates among like Marxists or whatever online or like anybody,
right,
like the people who are like revision like the revisionist who's a revisionist is relative, or who's like, who's doing it wrong
absolutely,
is relative, and to
absolutely,
them, to the people who like, are set like are making that accusation, like the people who, it's directed at are like introducing something, but it's the same thing or like it is parallels like how like people could be, literally like worshiping Jesus,
hmm
um, it's using the Christian example, and then like someone could look at that and be like, oh, you're worshiping Satan, because I like this practice is wrong for this XYZ reason, you
right.
know.
Which would be
Um,
that would be revisionism, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Or whatever. Like it would be the same thing. Like, oh yeah, you're being It's like, yeah, oh, I'm Marxist. No, you're a visionist. It's the same thing. Like this is the
yeah.
original. Like Hoxhaism is like the truth. It's like Ahojaism is the
Yeah,
truth.
Hojism
But
is truth. Yeah, I mean that's the
yeah,
irony. It's like, well, like
Gonzalism.
the Stalinists would call Khrushchev a revisionist, but the Khrushchevs would fire back that Stalin was the original revisionist of Lenin.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
then,
Exactly.
like, so
Yeah.
actually they're re-revising to a more correct thing, and then in a way everybody's a revisionist. I mean, it's like, I get what was originally meant
Yeah.
by it when going after like Kautsky the renegade. We should start calling people renegades again instead of revisionist. We should bring back renegade. It's got such a good ring.
Well,
I saw
it
some
does.
tweet the other. I think I retweeted something that was like Lenin would have called Mamdani a renegade or some shit like right now.
But the original renegades
Yeah.
were the white converts to Islam.
Is that where the term?
That's what it was
Uh,
used for, like in early modern England.
oh, interesting.
Like like the play The Renegado,
Oh, okay.
or
Because they
renegades because they
reneged
were like
on
they
Christianity.
defected from their country and
Oh wow.
became like basically like converting to Islam in those days basically meant that you like became an Ottoman kind of like a lot of the time like the
Right.
renegades were like that's why it's associated with piracy is because like a lot of the time they were pirates who
Okay.
like
Yeah.
were or like
Outlaws.
privateers or whatever who like
Mhm.
the Ottomans were like, hey, like we'll give you money to like work for us, and they're like, all right, word, like I'm Muslim now, like
Yeah.
time to like rob a bunch of like like English people now. Like um yeah
Critical support. Yeah.
yeah
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah. It's weird, but I I I think it's really fascinating how this type of thing his like, and one level it is separate from quote unquote like the big organized religions, but it's also always been there and been in like a state of kind of dialectical interplay with
And it's
it.
also organized. It's like another thing. Like I also hate the term organized religion because
That's
who is
true.
organizing it? Like it makes sense when you're talking about Catholicism because like it is an organization, but like
Maybe like
otherwise you're talking about
institutionalized
like
religion is
anything like a matrix of organizations or like yeah like but there's many institutions that participate in this phenomenon of religion, you know, so
yeah,
like
that's
it
true.
is an institution that like literally this nothing is a better example of an institution than like a practice of like when your kid gets sick you go to the St. Guinevere tree and like you know
Yeah.
that's an institution that's like an organized like you know that's
Yeah,
organized
maybe we need
religion.
a better
So
word of like belief complex or something like that. Like
honestly, we
ritual
need like
complex.
yeah, the whole like and I mean I think that's part of his point actually is that
Hmm.
like trying to like talk about the abstract idea or David Gordon White's point that is talk about like the abstract idea of religion is like just like so like pointless dumb and like what he's actually trying to get back to is like you know talking about like these different like what he's called like he calls them life worlds or whatever but like you know basically like the I don't know. I guess I would use the term like on like I use my favorite terms ontology and epistemology. Like
Weltanschauung.
they're you know they're or yeah they're Weltanschauungs yeah but
Hmm.
they're also though their ontologies their epistemologies like they're yeah like they're like that's the thing like it's like oh they weren't you know this is like oh they weren't being materialists they were like idealists or whatever it's like that but this was their you could call it
They thought they were
the
materialist.
yeah, you could call it like polycentric materialisms or whatever. You know, this was their understand the diversity of materialisms. Um, you know,
Right. Don't shame their materialism. How about that for
don't
postmodern
shame their
revision?
materialism.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. How
Yeah.
about that? Don't
Listen and learn.
listen and
Um,
learn because yeah, calling it all trying to sort it out into like religion also begs like the comparison to no religion and like the modern it's a very modernist kind of thing because now you do have you know a chunk of the world's population that maybe doesn't believe in or practice any of these spiritual
well, especially
routines.
like in our sort of like the circles that like we certainly encounter people like that fairly often. You know, people who basically like they consider it is very interesting actually because like I've said this about like Islam in particular in that like I think that a lot of the like sort of and this totally makes sense if you think about like the genealogy of a lot of like modern day atheist discourse doesn't really go back to people like Marx or Engels or whatever. It goes back to Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, and Richard Dawkins. And like, you know,
Yeah.
my thing is that like a lot of the attacks that people make now on like quote unquote religion in general, that is just like an expanded form of the way that like of the Christian polemic that people have made against Islam for centuries. And really, you could say that it is like now, but now it's expanded to, you know, turn back on Christianity itself. And like, you know, atheism really like the idea that atheism is a Christian heresy kind of like holds some water. But the you know, not totally, but it's
You
some.
mean a
But
heretical like form of Christianity?
yeah, that atheism is like an offshoot of Christianity, you know,
I
like it is
see.
yeah.
Kind of like how neoconservatism is like a strange mutation of Trotskyism kind of thing. Where
Maybe,
you
yeah,
think it
but
would be like very opposed to that. You know, like Christians, atheists,
or
like
like it actually emerges yeah exactly it emerges from that in many ways but like anyway like it to in this particular one you could say that like yeah like for you know a lot of like modern day like atheists
mhm.
like they are basically viewing all religious practice as superstition you know in the same way
Yes.
that
Yeah.
like you know the Dominican monk Stephen was viewing Saint Guinevere as superstition you know
That is
but
funny.
it's
Yeah,
all
the
relative. Yeah, and
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
survival because, of course, religion is supposed to go away, but it's not happening. It's not happening. That was a yeah a flawed prediction. It's not going away.
Right. It's
So
certainly not the belief in the
and it's also
spiritual.
totally relative what it even is. But anyway, whatever.
Well, yeah, the belief in the spiritual aspect of reality, if you will, to put it as broadly as possible, I don't think is going away. And I mean, on top of that, now we are facing a world where even if it was all never true, and the Reddit atheists were totally right, now they're trying to build like a technological simulacra of the spirit world and like force all of us to like basically interact with like jinn and like little demons, little goblins and shit, like every day of our lives, and like make it completely inescapable. So, you know, at the very least on a conceptual level, like this kind of talk about invisible forces, like, you know, bearing down upon us or like subverting us, and like how to protect ourselves. Like in some ways it's like, I don't know, it's an interesting way to think about today's problems, I think, even from a materialist perspective of like, how do you, you know, beat the Palantir, you know, scrying stone or whatever the fuck, you know, that now has been built.
I mean,
how do you beat
yeah,
the watchful eyes of possessed crows, i.e. like cell phone surveillance, you know, that are watching you, like the great witch of them all, Peter Thiel. Like, how do you break his spell? You know, because
I did say many atheists, hashtag not all atheists. Sorry, I'm addressing the chat. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I think like part of it is like, you know, yeah, if you're gonna try to make like an apologistic argument, like part of it is that like there is this sort of like myth of progress we talked about before, this kind of like Whig narrative of history where like everything is getting better and better. People are getting smarter and smarter. It's kind of like the Steven Pinker thing. I was seeing a Steven Pinker quote the other day where he said like, you know, like the average person from 1910 would be like mentally disabled by our modern standards, and it's like that's not remotely true.
Bullshit.
In fact, like probably the average like educated person well, you know, I guess he's talking about the average person, but anyway, whatever. Like
they probably learned
like
phonics,
the grammar school
so...
curriculum in 1910 was like probably like, you know, more rigorous than like a lot of undergraduate you know, curriculums. But you know, not everyone went to school. But anyway, like. Still, like, it's this, like, we don't ontologically dumber. He's just talking about the education levels. It doesn't have anything to do with being mentally disabled. But anyway, my point is that it's certainly not true. Like, and you can see this in history that like people losing like how to make concrete and things like that, you know, like it is definitely not true that like everyone who's like lived in the past was dumb. Like you're like, you know, your ancestors were stupid, you know, like I'm sorry, I sounded like a little bit like a short, like that was kind of like a right-wing comment, like your ancestors were not dumb, but you know, it's like it's true, like most people in human history like are not like stupid, you know, like it's not like this thing where it's like we know everything better than anyone else. Like that is falling into this like sort of like really like the ultimate like liberal progressivist like imperialistic trap.
Yeah, I think
like,
I think it's a bad way to think about
it is,
like the march of human progress.
I can't learn anything because like we know everything now. We understand the quarks and the bosons, and they were just stupid. Like no, like
they weren't stupid.
That is very. I think that's very ignorant. Yeah,
they all survived. That's something, you know. Not everybody. They all survived and like had children, and then their children had children, and et cetera, et cetera. So like they, you know. Like,
and they were also like not any different from like there's no like that's the thing like to say like oh you know if we brought this person here like they would be like you know the average person they would have like an IQ of 2 or whatever, like that doesn't make any sense if you think like these people all do, that IQ is like an inborn like inherent trait. Inherently like you are the same as a person who like lived like you know in terms of like ontologically like you know the
like
same way like you know a lab-grown diamond
ago.
is a diamond. You know, like yeah, like
10,000 years ago.
There's nothing like about your brain that's bigger or like smarter or whatever than someone who lived like the sea people's time. You know, like you are the same type of human being with the same capacities, the same ability to reason, and they like brought these conclusions based on the reasons that like you have. You know, if you don't think you're smarter than every person living now, then you know. Now, I mean, smarter than every person living in the past.
People 5,000 years ago had, and you know, like every you know century prior to us, like had more limited access to like information about the world. So like we definitely get to benefit from like the collective efforts of humanity to like sort of make sense of our like reality and like how things work. And you know, so like obviously both conceptually and with like technology and stuff, you know, we have plumbing and running water.
There's social differences, yeah. Like, but also so, does that mean that like we understand more, that we have like tons of conveniences and that we're all addicted to our phones?
It doesn't make us smarter.
Our attention spans suck.
Right.
And we like have more access to information, but we use it to like bet on sports and get addicted to Candy Crush.
Right.
It's
not all just all good, no bad.
Games.
Yeah, exactly. Hunter-gatherers are probably pretty fucking smart.
Tell Grok to make erotica You know, like, so yeah,
Whoever
awesome.
like, I don't care if astrology's bullshit. The first person who like mapped all that shit out is smart. You know what I mean? Like that's, like, you have no education. You live out in the field as a hunter gatherer, and then look at the stars at night, and then try
And
to
also,
like,
like,
predict them over the years. Like,
are those people like, is it all is astrology more bullshit or less bullshit than like Austrian economics? Like is
one has had great sticking power for thousands of years. The other one's a baby of, that does not really conform to reality. I
yeah,
mean, yeah, yeah. On the surface, it would seem much more serious and like,
like
backed by
economics in
data.
general. Is economics like more or less bullshit than
Economics
astrology?
is it's
What do you
kind of
think it
like
is?
manipulating data to achieve objectives and like achieve consent for objectives and like define, like, it's not a science. Like
I mean, if
it's a dark
economy is
art
like
in a way.
household management, then like, yeah, an economist would be like someone who like helps you like propitiate the like, spirit in your house to make sure it doesn't steal your baby. Basically,
Right,
those people are
right.
the ancestors of economists. Or
Yeah,
the,
yeah.
the forebears.
Hmm.
Yeah.
They can cast
Um,
spells on us, and convince
they
us that
constantly
bad
cast
things are good.
spells.
You know,
Um,
yeah.
and they make
Milton
us, we
Friedman.
believe in something totally invisible and entirely based on belief, like the stock market. Um,
Yeah,
and
we're in
the
an age of
value of our
digital alchemy.
currency, which, never, yeah, but whatever,
There is something sorcerous about that, especially. I mean, there's something sorcerous about being like a dollar being backed by gold. That's like that's got alchemist vibes. Itself and coinage and like the kind of like the susness of coinage, like over history as like a method of um almost like a, I don't know, like manifesting value where it otherwise like wouldn't exist, like these little magic talisman that like convinces people through participation in like an economic system that like this thing has value. People will kill for it. You know what I mean? Like it's just a
Yeah.
piece of rock, but like it's invested with the. It's really kind of like magical when you think about it. Like that
Oh,
like
totally.
everybody agrees that like $100 bill has like power. It's
And that's the
invested with
only
power.
thing, yeah, that
It's
like
both
actually gives
material
it
and it's
value.
completely like made up and conceptual and like idealistic and like something that just floats around in the air. Like it's not actually.
Yeah.
It's based
And its value
upon.
is often tied to oil, which, as we know, is a gin.
Yep.
So,
There you go. There you go. I mean, China's banning its rare earth minerals, for they're putting, taxes on it for America. And then, you know, I've been reading a lot of stuff lately about reckoning with the consequences of our the modern American economy, like going just fully into like services and financialization, and also like that coinciding with the decoupling of the dollar from gold and just becoming this, yeah, oil backed, this gin backed fiat currency backed by like military power and
yeah, it's a gin-backed
whatever.
fiat
It's a
currency.
gin backed fiat
Wow.
currency, and like we're kind of trapped in it now because like our elites basically just and convinced everybody, like ensorcelled everybody into going along with it, in the 70s, 80s, 90s. But now we're kind of trapped because like we don't build anything like material, like we sort of outsourced our entire industrial apparatus. Like everybody does jobs, like us included, that are like quote unquote into like intellectual labor or like service related labor or like something like that don't involve like the production of like commodities or even providing like like healthcare services and stuff like that. Like we're kind of trapped and we're cooked. They're like there's no easy way out without getting totally cooked. And we don't teach our children to read anymore because like that's apparently like socially threatening to the capitalists. So they just want everybody on like ballerina cappuccino, like brain rot slop feeds all day. uh I don't know, like, yeah. And it feels sorcerous, the whole thing, and it's all been kept up by this complex of like zero interest rate policy, and then like Like the Fed is like this like fucking council of like wizards that just get to like be vague and like say that their spells like move markets, you know, Fed speak. It's like a magical language where like Jerome Powell says like one like little buzzword that then everyone's like, oh my God, we gotta sell.
I think we've explored this analogy sufficiently.
Folks, it's all magical.
Yeah,
it's all magical.
It's magical.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. Like
it's all Daemonology.
I mean, it's like I like just think about this, like, you know, like just step outside, you know, I don't know why I'm addressing this imaginary doubter, because they're probably not even out there. Probably everyone is totally on board with what we're saying, but in case anyone out there is a doubter, just like put yourself outside your own position. Imagine, you know, being in the position of someone from the past or someone from the future and looking, you know, objectively at our time. And is there anything that you would see as like being like completely irrational, nonsensical, even superstitious about our day-to-day lives half the time? Like, you know that there is. So, you know, you can't judge those of us who are gin-pilled.
Right. Everyone's talking. Yeah. People are talking to the Oracle of Delphi.
In fact, those who are gin-pilled might be more, might be more materialist than those who aren't.
That's what I'm saying. Even if there were never actually jinn, there are cyber jinn now. They're building them, and they want them to kind of ensorcel and rule over all of us.
But they're
I'm just saying
it is striking how like you can totally see like the analogy between like the practices like, you know, like the mirror divination, things like that, like the communication with daemons. Like it does still happen now. Like it does. Like it's just like kind of like they have a different methodology for it, you know.
Better technology for it.
Exactly.
They
just
can
like,
do things
like we spend our entire days staring into mirrors. I'm literally looking at myself
me too.
right now.
I'm looking at a mirror right now. It's
like
kind of
I'm looking at
honestly.
you in like 3 different screens. Like, you know, I have you in the Zoom window and I have you in the stream to make sure it doesn't lag. And I'm seeing myself talking.
Our
and
reflections are on 3 screens that I can see right now.
At.
Yeah,
like.
No. I'm staring at the black eye on Saturn of my camera, staring at me.
We spend all day staring into mirrors. We live our lives in mirrors.
A ring camera? What else has rings, Khalid?
Saturn. Yeah, I see. I finally got it right. I finally got one of your vague questions correct. You're talking about Saturn.
It's all lesser black magic, as Griffin says in the chat. Yes. It kind of
in some cases higher. If it's not lesser, it's higher. It's certainly not black magic.
Mm-hmm. But one thing is for sure, Daemons are forever.
They are, yeah. Exactly. Daemons are forever. There you go. The title of the book is quite true.
And they're not necessarily a girl's best friend, contrary to a lot of psyops that have been put out there.
No.
Even the similarity of diamond, maybe etymology check for later. Diamond,
I don't think there's an etymology there. That's going to be the one where there actually is an etymology I can watch, but I really don't think so. I think that like
another mystified commodity that like sparkles and looks like a magical like jewel that like wars were started for, and like, you know, like brings forth like horrible things, but people are like obsessed with it, like because I don't know.
It's derived from adamos, like as an adamant, like unalterable, unbreakable, and
interesting.
So
wow, adamant.
So adamant, diamond.
Oh wow. Sounds like a cover up, but whatever. I'll take it for now. All right. I guess we can get out of there.
Cover up, yeah.
Yeah. We'll probably be back next Tuesday. I'm going to be out of office again this weekend.
Okay, word.
Yeah, but probably next Tuesday we'll be back with y'all. Yeah.
Word.
But you know, stay safe out there. You know.
Yeah, be
watch out for wells and sulfur hot spring deposits and things of that nature. But mostly watch out for the daemons in your pocket, I think. Both your money and your phone. The daemons in your pocket, yeah. But all right, we're gonna get out there. But until next time, dear listeners, stay vigilant.
Peace.